The moment she refused to kneel, everything changed. But what the Alpha King saw in her eyes that night would ignite a war that could destroy them both. Stay until the end to see how a rejected outcast became the most powerful queen the Frozen Lands had ever known. Drop a comment with your city below. Let's see where everyone's watching from. Part 1. The Girl Who Refused to Break. The rejection circle smelled like wet stone and fear. Calith Varn stood in the center of it, barefoot on frozen ground, while 200 wolves watched from the shadows. The ceremony of severance always happened at midnight, always in winter, always with the full pack bearing witness. She'd known this was coming for 3 years, ever since her mother's execution. Calith Varn! Elder Morven's voice cut through the silence like a blade dragged across bone. He was a skeletal man with gray hair twisted into ceremonial knots, and when he spoke, his breath came out in white clouds. You have been summoned before the Silverfang Council to answer for the taint in your blood. Do you understand the charges? She didn't answer immediately. Her hands hung loose at her sides. Her dark hair, unbound and tangled, fell past her shoulders. She wore the plain gray shift they'd given her that morning, the kind reserved for those about to be cast out. I understand, she said quietly. Morven's lip curled. Then you know what comes next. Around the circle, pack members shifted on their feet. Most wouldn't meet her eyes. A few looked openly satisfied. Calith recognized them, the ones who'd whispered blood traitor when she walked past, who'd spat at her feet in the market, who'd blamed her mother's crimes on anyone unfortunate enough to share her name. She saw Lyra standing near the front, a girl she'd grown up with. They'd hunted together as children, shared secrets under the full moon. Now Lyra's face was carefully blank, her eyes focused somewhere past Calith's shoulder, refusing to acknowledge 3 years of friendship. That hurt more than the hatred. Calith Varn, Morven continued, louder now, his voice echoing off the stone walls of the ceremonial ground. Your mother conspired with rogue elements to undermine this pack's leadership. She carried forbidden magic in her veins. She passed that corruption to you. The council has determined that you are unfit to remain among the Silverfang. You will be cast out, exiled, stripped of protection. He paused, letting the weight of it settle. Do you beg the council's mercy? That was the tradition. The one being cast out was supposed to drop to their knees, press their forehead to the dirt, and plead for reconsideration. It didn't matter that the decision was already made. It was about submission, about showing the pack that even in exile, they still held power over you. Calith had watched 7 rejections in her lifetime. All 7 had begged. All 7 had been cast out anyway. She lifted her chin. No. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a held breath, a collective flinch. Someone in the back dropped something metal, and the clang echoed like a gunshot. Morven's eyes narrowed. You refuse? I refuse. You stupid girl, he hissed, leaning forward. Do you understand what you're doing? Better than you think. A woman near the edge gasped. Another muttered a curse that sounded like a prayer, but Calith didn't move. She kept her gaze locked on the elder, her spine straight, her hands steady even though her heart hammered against her ribs. Her mother had knelt. Her mother had begged. And they'd killed her anyway, burned her alive in front of the entire pack while Calith watched from behind the barricade they'd erected to keep her from interfering. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. You dare? Morven started, his face flushing red. I dare, Calith interrupted, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut. You've already decided. So why should I beg? You want me gone? Fine. I'm gone. But I won't crawl for you. Morven's hand shot to the ceremonial staff he carried. For a heartbeat, Calith thought he might actually strike her. The muscles in his jaw clenched so hard she could see the veins bulging in his neck, and his knuckles went white around the carved wood. You will show respect. For what? Calith asked. For a council that condemned my mother without a fair trial? For a pack that turned on us the moment things got difficult? Tell me, Elder, what exactly am I supposed to respect? The crowd erupted. Voices overlapped in a chaos of anger and shock. Insolent! How dare she? The taint runs deep. But beneath the anger, Calith heard something else. Uncertainty, because she was breaking the script, and no one knew what came next. Then a voice spoke from the darkness beyond the circle. Interesting. Every head turned. The voice belonged to a man who stepped forward with the kind of confidence that didn't need to be loud. He was tall, taller than anyone in the Silverfang pack, with broad shoulders wrapped in a heavy black cloak lined with silver fur. His hair was pale, almost white, and his eyes were the cold gray of winter storms. Scars marked his hands, visible even in the dim torchlight. Calith's breath caught. She knew who he was. Everyone did. Darian Frost, the Alpha King of the Northern Reach, ruler of the Frostborn sovereignty, a kingdom so brutal and unforgiving that even seasoned warriors hesitated before crossing its borders. He was a legend wrapped in ice and cruelty, a man who'd supposedly killed his own father to claim the throne and hadn't smiled since. Stories said he felt nothing. No anger, no joy, no fear. Just cold, calculating intelligence and a reputation for violence that kept his enemies at a distance. He walked into the circle like he owned it, his boots crunching on frost-covered stone. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a path. Morven immediately bowed, his staff clattering as he nearly dropped it. Alpha King, we did not expect, we were not informed of your arrival. Clearly. Darian's gaze swept over the gathered wolves with the disinterest of someone inspecting livestock, then settled on Calith. His expression gave nothing away. No curiosity, no judgment, just that flat, assessing stare. What's her crime? Her bloodline is tainted, Morven said quickly, his voice taking on the eager tone of someone trying to justify themselves to a superior. Her mother was executed for treason and forbidden magic 3 years ago. The council ruled that the daughter carries the same corruption. We're exercising our right to... I didn't ask what the council ruled. I asked what she did. Morven hesitated. His mouth opened and closed. She carries the same corruption, the same dangerous magic that... Has she used it? Not that we know of, but the risk... So she hasn't actually committed a crime. The potential for... That's not a crime, that's paranoia. Darian's tone remained flat, but something in it made Morven take a step back. You're exiling her for something she might do. Something her mother did. Not for anything she's done herself. Morven's face reddened. With respect, Alpha King, this is a Silverfang matter. Our laws are your own business until I decide they're not. Darian tilted his head slightly, still looking at Calith. You refuse to beg. It wasn't a question, but Calith answered anyway. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Yes. Why? Because begging won't change anything. They've already made their choice. They made it 3 years ago when they killed my mother. This ceremony is just theater. A faint trace of something, amusement, curiosity, flickered across Darian's face, so brief she might have imagined it. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. Smart, he said quietly. He turned to Morven. I'll take her. The elder blinked rapidly. I'm sorry? You heard me. She's coming with me. The crowd erupted again, louder this time. Confusion and protest mixed together in a wave of sound. Morven's face went from red to purple. Alpha King, with all due respect, she is an outcast, a liability. Her bloodline, her mother's crimes. We cannot in good conscience allow someone so dangerous to pukul... Are you suggesting, Darian interrupted, his voice dropping into something colder, sharper, like the temperature had just plummeted 10 degrees, that I'm incapable of managing a single exile? Morven paled. No, of course not. I only meant... Then it settled. Darian looked back at Calith. His eyes held no warmth, but they held no cruelty either. Just that same flat assessment. You have 2 choices. Stay here and take your chances in the wild, or come with me. Calith stared at him. This wasn't mercy. She could see that in his eyes, in the way he watched her like she was a tool he was considering purchasing. This was something else. Something transactional. Something she didn't understand yet. But staying here meant death. The pack wouldn't just let her leave. They'd hunt her down within a week to make sure the taint didn't spread. She'd be dead in a ditch somewhere, her body left for scavengers, her name forgotten. At least with him, she'd have a chance. I'll come, she said. Darian nodded once. Good. Get your things. I don't have anything. Even better. He habitually turned and walked toward the edge of the circle. clearly expecting her to follow. His soldiers materialized from the shadows. She hadn't even noticed them before, forming a loose escort around him. Caliph glanced back at the crowd one last time. A few faces looked relieved that the problem was solving itself. Most looked confused, uncertain what to make of this development, and a handful, the ones who'd hated her mother the most, looked furious, like they'd been robbed of something they'd been anticipating. She saw Lyra again. Their eyes met for half a second. Lyra looked away first. Caliph turned and followed the Alpha King into the night, leaving the only home she'd ever known without a backward glance. Darian's camp was a mile north of the Silverfang territory, tucked into a canyon where the wind howled like a living thing trying to find its way out. A dozen tents had been erected in a tight circle, military precise, and a bonfire crackled in the center, throwing long shadows against the rock walls. Soldiers moved through the camp with the kind of efficiency that spoke of years of training, sharpening weapons, checking supplies, speaking in low voices that never rose above the wind. All of them were frostborn. Caliph could tell by the way they moved. Economical, deliberate, nothing wasted, and by the way they watched her with cold, assessing eyes as she passed. Not hostile, just measuring. Darian led her to the largest tent and held the flap open without a word. Caliph hesitated for just a moment, then stepped through. The interior was sparse, a low table with a map spread across it, stones marking positions. A few cushions scattered around for seating. In the corner, a bedroll that looked like it hadn't been used in days, still perfectly made. No personal items. No decoration. Nothing that spoke of the person who occupied this space. Darian entered behind her and let the flap fall shut. The firelight outside filtered through the heavy canvas, casting everything in an amber glow that made shadows dance on the walls. "Sit," he said. Caliph sat on one of the cushions, keeping her back straight. Darian remained standing, arms crossed, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or discard. The silence stretched. Caliph refused to be the first to break it. Finally, Darian moved to the table and poured 2 cups of something dark from a clay jug. He handed one to her without comment. "Drink." Caliph sniffed it. Mulled wine, heavy with spices she didn't recognize. Cinnamon, maybe. Something sharper underneath. She took a cautious sip. It burned going down, but the warmth spread through her chest, cutting the chill that had settled into her bones during the ceremony. Darian drank his in one long swallow, then set the cup down with a quiet thunk. "I'm cursed." Caliph blinked. "What? You heard me. A blood curse, centuries old. It's killing me, slowly, turning me into something less." He said it without emotion, like he was commenting on the weather or the quality of the wine, just stating a fact. Caliph set her cup down carefully. "I don't understand. What does that have to do with me? Your bloodline." Darian leaned against the table, his gray eyes locked on hers. No warmth in them, but no malice either, just that same cold assessment. "Your mother carried magic that shouldn't exist anymore. Magic tied to the old pacts, the ones made before the kingdoms split, before the wars. My advisors believe you might carry the same thing. And you think I can break your curse? I think you're the only lead I have left." The honesty was almost brutal. No pretense, no attempt to soften it. Caliph picked up her cup again and took another sip, buying herself time to think. "So this is a transaction. My life for your cure." "Yes." At least he wasn't lying to her. "What happens if I can't help you?" she asked. Darian's expression didn't change. "Then you'll have lived longer than you would have in exile. Consider it a bonus. And if I can help you? Then you'll have earned your place in the Frostborn. Protection. Status. A life that doesn't end with you bleeding out in the wilderness." Caliph studied him. There was something deeply wrong with this man. Not evil, exactly, but hollow. Like someone had scooped out everything warm and soft and left only the functional parts behind. He spoke about his own death with the same tone someone else might use to discuss a broken wagon wheel. "What if I say no?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you didn't beg back there. That means you're a survivor, and survivors don't turn down their best option." He tilted his head slightly. "You're angry. You have every right to be. But you're not stupid. You know what exile means for someone like you." He was right. She hated that he was right. A week alone in the wilderness, maybe 2 if she was lucky and skilled, then hunger or cold or predators would finish what the pack started. She'd seen it happen before to others who'd been cast out. Their bodies turned up sometimes, half-eaten, frozen, unrecognizable. "Fine," Caliph said. "I'll help you, but I want something in return." Darian raised an eyebrow, the first real expression she'd seen from him. "You're in no position to negotiate." "Maybe not, but if I'm risking my life for this, I want to know what I'm getting." A faint trace of amusement crossed his face again. "What do you want?" "Protection. Real protection. Not just from exile. From anyone who comes after me because of my blood, because of what my mother was." "Done." "And answers. If my mother's magic is tied to this curse, I want to know the truth. All of it. What she was, what she did, why they really killed her." Darian was quiet for a long moment. His eyes never left hers. "That's dangerous knowledge." "I don't care. If I'm going to die trying to save you, I deserve to know what my mother died for." Another pause. Then slowly Darian nodded. "Agreed. But understand something. Once you know, you can't unknow it. Some truths change you." "I'm already changed." They made sure of that. Something shifted in Darian's expression. Not quite sympathy, but maybe recognition. Like he saw something in her that he understood. He extended his hand. Caliph looked at it. Scarred knuckles, calluses. The hand of someone who'd fought and killed and survived. She took it. His grip was firm, cold. "Welcome to the Frostborn," Darian said. The journey to the Frostborn sovereignty took 6 days. They traveled through mountain passes so narrow that Caliph could touch both walls at once, the stones slick with ice and treacherous underfoot. Across frozen rivers that cracked ominously under their horses' hooves, the sound echoing like gunshots in the silence. Through forests where the trees grew so thick and twisted that daylight barely reached the ground, and strange sounds echoed in the darkness between the trunks. Darian's soldiers didn't speak to her. They didn't speak to each other much either. Everything was efficient, disciplined, cold. They broke camp at dawn, rode until dusk, and made camp again with military precision. No wasted movement, no unnecessary conversation. Caliph rode near the back of the group, flanked by 2 guards who watched her like she might bolt at any moment. She didn't blame them. She was an unknown variable in their king's plan, and unknown variables got people killed in a place like this. The landscape grew harsher as they traveled north. The trees thinned and twisted, gnarled by constant wind. Snow appeared in patches, then covered everything. The air tasted like metal and ice. On the second day, they passed through a village, or what was left of one. Burned buildings, collapsed roofs, bones scattered in the street, picked clean by scavengers. The snow had started to cover everything, nature reclaiming what humanity had abandoned. "What happened here?" Caliph asked the guard to her left. He didn't answer, just kept his eyes forward. "Raiders," the guard to her right said quietly. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. 2 months ago, came down from the eastern wastes. We arrived too late." "Why would raiders come here? There's nothing." "That's why. No defenses, easy targets." He paused. "The king executed the ones we caught, personally." Caliph looked at Darian, riding at the front of the column. His back was straight, his posture relaxed, like they weren't passing through a graveyard. She wondered what personally meant. On the 3rd night, as they made camp in a sheltered valley where the wind didn't cut quite as deep, one of the soldiers approached her. He was younger than the others, maybe 20, with a scar across his jaw and nervous eyes that kept darting to his companions. "Here." He held out a thick wool cloak, better than the thin one she'd been given. "You'll freeze without it." Caliph took it, surprised by the weight. Quality wool lined with fur. "Thank you." He nodded and started to leave, but she stopped him. "What's your name?" "Garen." "Why are you helping me, Garen?" He glanced toward the command tent where Darian was meeting with his captains, their silhouettes visible against the canvas. "Because the king claimed you. That means you're under his protection, and anyone under his protection is one of us." "Even if they're tainted?" Garen's jaw tightened. "The king doesn't care about bloodlines, he cares about results, about loyalty, about whether you'll hold a line when things get bad." He met her eyes. "Everything else is noise." He walked away before she could ask anything else. Caliph wrapped the cloak around her shoulders. It was warm, heavy. It smelled like wood smoke and pine. That night she lay awake in her tent, staring at the canvas ceiling and listening to the wind. She thought about her mother, about the execution, about the way the pack had turned on them both without hesitation, like 3 generations of loyalty meant nothing the moment fear entered the equation. Her mother had screamed at the end. Caliph had tried to block it out, but the sound had burned itself into her memory. She still heard it sometimes in her dreams, and she thought about Darian Frost, a cursed king who felt nothing, who ruled through fear and cold calculation, who'd claimed her not out of kindness, but because she was a tool he needed. She should hate him, but instead she felt something stranger, curiosity. What kind of curse could hollow out a person like that? What had he been before? And was there anything left underneath the ice? On the 5th day, they encountered wolves, not pack wolves, wild ones. A hunting party of 6, lean and desperate, that appeared on a ridge above the trail and watched the column with eyes that gleamed yellow in the fading light. The soldiers immediately formed up, hands on weapons. Darian raised a hand. Hold. The wolves descended the ridge in a loose formation, moving with the coordinated intelligence of experienced hunters. They stopped 30 feet away, close enough that Caliph could see their ribs pressing against their fur. Starving. The largest one, a gray male with a torn ear, stepped forward. He shifted, the air rippling around him as fur became skin. Animal became human. He stood naked in the snow, unconcerned by the cold or his vulnerability. "Alpha King," he said. His voice was rough, unused to human speech. "We mean no challenge." Darian dismounted in one smooth motion. "Then what do you want?" "Permission to hunt in your territory. The winter's been hard, game's scarce. We have pups." "How many?" 3 litters, 14 pups total." Darian was quiet for a moment. Caliph watched him, trying to read his expression. It remained flat, unreadable. "You can hunt in the eastern valleys," Darian said finally, "but stay away from the settlements. And if I hear about any livestock going missing, I'll hunt you down myself. Understood?" The gray male bowed his head. "Understood. Thank you, Alpha King." He shifted back and led his pack away, disappearing into the trees. One of Darian's captains, a grizzled man with gray in his beard, rode up beside him. "That was generous." "That was practical," Darian replied, mounting his horse. "Desperate wolves attack settlements. Fed wolves don't. I'd rather avoid the problem. Still, some kings would have killed them for approaching. Some kings are idiots." They rode on. Caliph thought about that exchange for the rest of the day. The way Darian had assessed the situation without emotion made his decision based purely on logic, and moved on. No pride, no posturing, just efficiency. It should have been cold, but it had saved those wolves' lives. Awaken. The Frostborn sovereignty wasn't a city. It was a fortress carved into the side of a mountain. Caliph saw it on the morning of the 6th day, rising out of the mist like something out of a nightmare. Massive stone walls, blackened by age and weather, that seemed to grow directly from the mountain itself. Towers that jutted into the sky like broken teeth, their peaks lost in low-hanging clouds. And at the center, a palace of ice and iron that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Home," Darian said flatly, riding up beside her. Caliph stared. "It's bleak?" "I was going to say intimidating." "Same thing." As they drew closer, Caliph could make out more details. Guard towers every 100 feet along the walls. Ballistae mounted at strategic points. Gates thick enough to withstand a battering ram. This wasn't just a palace, it was a war machine. They rode through the main gate, and Caliph felt the weight of 100 eyes on her. Soldiers, servants, merchants in the market square. All of them stopped to stare as the Alpha King passed, and all of them noticed the strange woman riding beside him. Whispers followed in their wake like a physical thing. "Who's that? Where'd she come from? Why's the king brought her here? Look at her eyes." Darian ignored them completely. He dismounted in the central courtyard and handed his reins to a waiting groom without a word. "Take her to the guest wing, 3rd floor, east side." A woman in dark robes stepped forward. She was older, maybe 60, with silver hair pulled into a severe bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Her face had the kind of hardness that came from years of managing difficult situations and difficult people. "My lord," she said with a slight bow, "is this the one?" "Yes." The woman's gaze swept over Caliph, cold and assessing, taking in the travel-stained clothes, the exhaustion, the defensive way Caliph held herself. "She doesn't look like much." "Neither do most dangerous things," Darian said. "Make sure she has everything she needs, clean clothes, hot water, food, and assign her a guard." "Is that necessary?" "Yes." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "As you wish." Darian turned to Caliph. "This is Morella. She runs the household. Do what she says, and you'll be fine." Then he walked away without another word, his captains following. Just like that. No explanation, no reassurance. He'd delivered his cargo and moved on to the next task. Morella's expression didn't change as she watched him go. Then she looked back at Caliph. "Follow me." The guest wing was quieter than the rest of the palace, tucked into a corner where the noise of the courtyard didn't reach. Morella led Caliph up 3 flights of stairs, stone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and down a long corridor lined with closed doors. "This is yours." Morella opened the last door on the left. The room was small but clean, a bed with thick blankets, a desk near the window, a narrow window that looked out over the mountains, the view both beautiful and bleak. A fire had already been lit in the hearth, crackling quietly. It was more than Caliph had expected. "Meals are delivered twice a day," Morella said, her tone brisk and businesslike. "Morning and evening. If you need anything else, ring the bell by the door. Someone will come." "Thank you," Caliph said. Morella paused in the doorway, her hand on the frame. "A word of advice. Don't wander. The palace is not kind to those who don't know its rules." "What rules?" "That's for you to figure out." Morella's green eyes held something that might have been warning or might have been sympathy. "The king has enemies here. People who don't like change. People who don't like outsiders. Keep your head down, don't make trouble, and don't trust anyone who's too friendly too fast." "What about you?" Morella's expression didn't change. "I'm not friendly. I'm efficient. There's a difference." She closed the door. Caliph stood alone in the room, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant sound of wind against stone. She moved to the window and looked out at the frozen landscape stretching endlessly in every direction, mountains and snow and sky all bleeding into each other. This was her life now. A prisoner in all but name, but at least she was still breathing. She touched the window glass. It was ice cold against her palm. What have I gotten myself into? She didn't see Darian again for 2 days. During that time, Caliph explored the guest wing, tested the boundaries of where she was allowed to go, and learned the rhythms of the palace. Servants came and went on strict schedules, always moving with purpose, never lingering. Guards patrolled in pairs, their routes timed to overlap, and everyone moved with the same cold efficiency she'd seen in Darian's soldiers. The palace itself was a maze, corridors that doubled back on themselves, staircases that led to dead ends, rooms that seemed to serve no purpose except to confuse. On the second morning, Caliph found a library. It wasn't marked, and the door was unlocked, so she slipped inside. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, old books, their spines cracked and faded. Maps covered a large table in the center, and in the corner, a fireplace with chairs arranged around it, worn smooth by use. Caliph ran her fingers along the spines. History, strategy, magic, languages she didn't recognize. "You're not supposed to be here." She spun around. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, thin, with black hair going gray at the temples and eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He wore dark robes similar to Morella's, marked with silver thread at the cuffs. "I'm sorry," Caliph said quickly. "The door was open. I didn't know." "I didn't say you had to leave." The man stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I said you're not supposed to be here. There's a difference." He moved to the table and began rolling up one of the maps. "You're the one the king brought back. The exile." "Yes. Interesting. He doesn't usually collect strays." The man glanced at her over his spectacles. "I'm Corvin, the king's chief advisor, which means I'm responsible for keeping him alive despite his best efforts to get himself killed." "Caliph, I know who you are. Everyone does by now. The tainted girl with the dead mother and the dangerous blood." Corvin secured the map with a leather strap. "You've caused quite a stir." "I didn't ask to be here." "No one ever does." He studied her for a moment. "Can you read?" The question surprised her. "Yes." "Well?" "Well enough." "Good. The king will need that." Corvin moved to the shelves and pulled down a thick leather-bound journal. "This is for you. Everything we know about the curse, read it, understand it, because in 3 days we begin testing, and if you're not prepared, it could kill you." He held out the journal. Calith took it. The leather was soft with age. The pages yellowed. "Testing? Your blood, your magic, whatever you inherited from your mother." Corvin's expression was unreadable. "The king believes you can break the curse. I think he's desperate and grasping at straws. But I've been wrong before." "Have you?" "Once. 10 years ago. I'm still bitter about it." He moved toward the door. "Read the journal, all of it, and if you have questions, find me. I'm usually here or in the council chambers." "Why are you helping me?" Corvin paused with his hand on the door. "Because if you can actually save him, you'll be the most important person in this kingdom, and if you can't, you'll be dead, and it won't matter. Either way, I'd rather you be informed." He left. Calith stood alone in the library holding the journal. She opened it to the first page. The handwriting was cramped and precise. At the top, a date, 300 years ago. She began to read. That night, Calith read the journal cover to cover. The curse had started during a war between the Frostborn and a coalition of rival packs. The fighting had been brutal, dragging on for decades, bleeding both sides dry. Darien's ancestor, King Aldrich Frost, had made a deal with something ancient, something that predated the kingdoms and the packs, and even the old magic. The texts called it the Hollow One. In exchange for power, enough power to end the war, Aldrich had offered a piece of his humanity, his ability to feel, to love, to fear. The deal had worked. The Frostborn had won decisively, crushing their enemies in a campaign that lasted less than a year. But the price was a curse passed down through the royal bloodline. Every king since then had felt it, a slow erosion of emotion, of connection, of everything that made them human. Most had died before it consumed them completely, either in battle or by their own hand when the emptiness became unbearable. Darien was running out of time. According to the journal, the curse was accelerating. He had maybe a year, maybe less. Already he struggled with emotions that normal people took for granted. Anger, joy, grief. They were distant echoes growing fainter. Soon, there would be nothing left. The only way to break the curse was through a counterspell tied to the same ancient magic that had created it. Magic like her mother's. Magic that shouldn't exist anymore, but somehow did. Calith closed the journal and stared at the dying fire in her hearth. She didn't know if she could help him. But she knew one thing. If she failed, she wouldn't be the only one who paid the price. This kingdom, harsh as it was, needed its king. And if Darien fell, the power vacuum would tear everything apart. She'd seen what happened to packs without strong leadership. The Silverfang had almost collapsed after a succession dispute 15 years ago. 3 months of chaos. Blood in the streets, families torn apart. This would be worse. Much worse. Calith stood and moved to the window. Below, the palace was quiet, most of its inhabitants asleep. But guards still walked the walls, and lights still burned in a few towers where people worked through the night. Somewhere in this fortress, Darien Frost was awake, wrestling with a curse that was slowly killing him. And somehow, impossibly, she was supposed to save him. What was my mother? Calith thought. What did she know? And why did they really kill her? The questions had no answers, not yet, but she would find them. She had to, because if she didn't, they were all dead. On the third morning, Morella appeared at Calith's door before dawn. "Get up. The king wants you in the testing chamber within the hour." Calith had barely slept. The journal's contents had kept her mind racing through the night, tracing connections between her mother's execution and the ancient magic described in those yellowed pages. She splashed cold water on her face from the basin, pulled on the clean clothes that had been left for her, dark practical fabric that marked her as neither servant nor nobility, and followed Morella down corridors she didn't recognize. They descended deep into the mountain, past the palace's inhabited levels, into sections carved from raw stone. The air grew colder with each step. Torches provided the only light, their flames creating shadows that danced like restless spirits. "What exactly happens in these tests?" Calith asked. Morella didn't turn around. "You'll find out soon enough. Try not to die. The king gets irritable when his experiments fail." "Comforting. I don't do comfort. I do honesty." They stopped at a heavy iron door guarded by 2 soldiers who stepped aside without question. Morella pushed it open. The chamber beyond was circular, maybe 40 feet across, with symbols carved into the floor in patterns that made Calith's eyes hurt when she tried to follow them. Corvin stood near a table covered in strange instruments, glass vials, silver needles, bowls filled with substances she couldn't identify. And at the center of the room, standing perfectly still, was Darian. He looked worse than he had 6 days ago. The circles under his eyes had deepened. His skin held a grayish tint like frost was forming just beneath the surface. When he turned to face her, his movements were precise but somehow wrong, like he was operating his body through conscious effort rather than instinct. "You read the journal," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "Then you understand what we're dealing with." "I understand that you made a deal with something that's been eating you alive for generations. I understand that every king in your line has suffered this curse. I understand that I'm supposed to fix it somehow." Calith stepped further into the room, her boots echoing on stone. "What I don't understand is how you expect me to do that when I don't even know what magic I supposedly carry. That's what we're here to find out." Darian gestured to a chair at the center of the carved symbols. "Sit." Calith looked at Corvin. "Is this safe?" "No," Corvin said bluntly. "But neither is doing nothing. Choose your risk." She sat. Darian moved around her, studying the symbols on the floor. "Your mother's execution. Do you know what actually happened that day?" The question caught her off guard. She was burned for treason and forbidden magic. "But do you know what the magic was? What they caught her doing?" Calith's hands clenched on the armrests. "No, they never told me. They just said she'd conspired against the pack. She was trying to break a binding." Darian crouched near one of the symbols, tracing it with his finger. "A very old one. Similar to the curse I carry. The Silver Fang Council found her in the old temple grounds, performing a ritual that should have been impossible. She was bleeding from her eyes and ears, but she was alive. And the binding she was attacking? It shattered." Calith's breath caught. "What binding?" "We're not sure, but whatever it was, it had been holding something back for a very long time." Darian stood. 3 weeks later, strange things started happening in Silverfang territory. Animals behaving oddly, people having visions. The council panicked and blamed your mother. They executed her before anyone could ask the right questions. "And you think I can do what she did?" "I think you might carry the same ability. Blood magic of a very specific, very rare type. The kind that can unmake old promises." Darian nodded to Corvin. "We're going to find out." Corvin approached with a silver needle. "This will hurt. Try not to move." He pricked Calith's finger, let 3 drops of blood fall into a crystal bowl, then added powder that hissed when it made contact. The mixture turned black, then silver, then settled into a deep red that seemed to pulse with its own light. "Interesting," Corvin murmured, leaning closer. "Very interesting." "What?" Calith demanded. "Your blood has an echo, like it remembers something." Corvin looked at Darian. "She definitely carries the marker. Whether she can control it is another question." Darian's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Relief, maybe, or the echo of it. "Then we proceed to phase 2. "Wait," Calith stood up. "What's phase 2? "Direct contact," Darian said. "Your blood touching mine. If the curse reacts, we'll know there's a connection. And if it reacts badly, then Corvin will do his best to keep us both alive." "That's not reassuring." "It's not meant to be." Darian held out his hand. "Your choice. But decide now." Calith looked at that outstretched hand, at the scars crossing his knuckles, at the gray tint spreading under his skin like ice forming on a pond. He was dying. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but soon. And if he died, this entire kingdom would tear itself apart in the chaos that followed. She took his hand. The moment their skin made contact, pain exploded through her arm like lightning running through her veins. She tried to pull away but couldn't. Their hands had locked together, fingers intertwined. and something was happening between them that she didn't understand. Darian made a sound that might have been pain or surprise. His eyes had gone completely silver, reflecting nothing. Kalith felt something inside her wake up, something that had been sleeping her entire life, coiled tight in her bones and blood. It recognized the curse in Darian like meeting an old enemy, and it was angry. "Corvin," she gasped. "I see it." The advisor's voice was tight. "Don't fight it. Let it flow." The thing inside her didn't want to flow. It wanted to tear and rip and destroy. It recognized the Hollow One's mark on Darian's soul, and it wanted to burn it out by the roots. "No," Kalith gritted out. "That'll kill him." "Then control it," Corvin snapped. But she didn't know how. Her mother had never taught her this, had probably never had the chance, cut down before she could pass on whatever knowledge she'd carried. The symbols on the floor began to glow, responding to the magic bleeding from their joined hands. The temperature in the room dropped so fast that Kalith's breath came out in white clouds. Darian's grip tightened. His voice, when he spoke, sounded strained. "Stop fighting. Work with it. The curse wants to spread. Your magic wants to destroy. Find the middle ground." "How?" "I don't know. Figure it out." The pain reached a crescendo that made her vision white out. But through it, Kalith felt something shift. The angry, destructive force inside her and the cold, consuming curse inside Darian, they were circling each other like wolves trying to decide whether to fight or flee. She thought of her mother's face, of the way she'd looked the morning of the execution, calm despite knowing what was coming. She'd been trying to break a binding, trying to free something. Maybe that was the answer. Not destruction, not consumption, but unlocking. Kalith breathed out slowly and stopped fighting. Stopped trying to control the magic. Instead, she just opened. The effect was immediate. The pain cut off like someone had severed a wire. The glow from the symbols faded, and Darian's eyes returned to their normal gray, though they held something new. Surprise, maybe, or fear. They both stumbled back, breaking contact. Kalith's hand felt like she'd plunged it into boiling water, then ice water, then fire again. She cradled it against her chest, breathing hard. Darian leaned against the table, his composure fractured. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely shaken. "Did it work?" Kalith asked hoarsely. Corvin was examining his instruments, his expression unreadable. "Partially." The curse recognized her blood magic as a threat. It recoiled, but it didn't break. "So I failed." "No." Darian straightened, his mask of control sliding back into place, though it didn't fit quite as perfectly as before. "You proved you can touch the curse without being consumed. That's more than anyone else has managed in 300 years. Great. What's next?" "Next we do it again and again, until we find the right approach." Darian moved toward the door. "You have 2 days to recover, then we continue." He left without another word. Kalith sank back into the chair, her whole body trembling. Morella appeared with water, pressing the cup into her shaking hands. "Drink." Kalith drank. The water was cold and clean and helped steady her. "You did well," Corvin said quietly, packing away his instruments. "Better than I expected, honestly. Most people would have panicked and let the magic run wild. I almost did. Almost doesn't count." He paused. "Your mother would be proud." Kalith looked at him sharply. "Did you know her?" "I met her once, years ago, at a gathering of the packs. She was formidable. Scary, actually. The kind of person who saw through every lie you told and most of the ones you were planning to tell." Corvin closed his case. "She scared the council. That's probably why they killed her so quickly. They were afraid of what she might do if they gave her time." "What did she tell you when you met?" Corvin's expression turned distant. "She said that the old magic was waking up again, that the pacts and bindings that held the world together were starting to fray. She said someone would need to make hard choices soon or everything would unravel." He focused on Kalith again. "I thought she was just being dramatic. Turns out she was right." "About what?" "About everything," Chateau sat. The next 2 days passed in a blur of exhaustion and anxiety. Kalith's hand healed slowly, the burns fading to red marks that Corvin assured her would disappear eventually. She spent the time reading more of the journals in the library, searching for any mention of magic like hers. She found very little. Most references to blood magic had been deliberately destroyed or redacted, leaving only fragments. But what remained painted a picture of something dangerous and powerful, magic that could rewrite the fundamental rules of reality if wielded correctly, or destroy the wielder if it wasn't. On the evening of the second day, Calith heard raised voices echoing through the corridor outside her room. She cracked her door open and peered out. 3 people were arguing near the main staircase. She recognized one as Morella. The other 2 were nobles, judging by their fine clothes and the arrogant way they held themselves. A middle-aged man with a military bearing and a younger woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. "Completely unacceptable," the man was saying. "The king brings this creature into our midst without consulting the council. The king doesn't require the council's permission for his personal affairs," Morella said coolly. "His personal affairs? Is that what we're calling it?" The woman's voice dripped contempt. "He's experimenting with forbidden magic in the heart of our stronghold, using some exile trash as his test subject. What happens when it goes wrong? When whatever she's carrying breaks loose and kills us all? Then you'll die knowing the king was trying to save this kingdom," Morella replied, "which is more than you're doing." The man stepped closer, his hand on his sword hilt. "Watch your tone, steward. Council members have protections even you can't ignore. And the king has authority that supersedes your protections. Would you like me to remind you of that in front of the entire court?" The standoff lasted another beat. Then the 2 nobles turned and stalked away, their angry whispers fading down the corridor. Morella stood there a moment longer, her shoulders tight. Then she looked directly at Calith's door. "You can come out. They're gone." Calith stepped into the corridor. Who were they? Lord Vastin and Lady Meredith, 2 of the most powerful voices on the ruling council. Morella's expression was grim. "They've been looking for an excuse to undermine the king for years. You just handed them one." "I didn't ask to be here." "Doesn't matter. You're here now, and that makes you a target." Morella moved closer, lowering her voice. "Listen carefully. The king has enemies in this court, people who want him weak, people who benefit from the curse keeping him isolated and emotionally compromised. They'll see you as a threat." "How am I a threat? I'm nobody." "You're the person trying to save him. That's enough." Morella's green eyes held something like concern. "Be careful. Don't trust anyone who's too friendly. Don't accept food or drink from anyone except servants I personally assign. And if anyone tries to get you alone, refuse." "You think someone would actually—" "I think people have killed for less in this palace. The king's protection only extends so far." Morella started to leave, then paused. "And Calith, don't wander at night. The palace has parts that are not safe, even for those under the king's protection." She left Calith standing in the corridor, questions piling up with no answers. The second round of testing was worse than the first. Darian looked even more deteriorated when Calith entered the chamber 3 days after their initial attempt. The gray had spread further across his skin, and his movements had taken on a mechanical quality that made her stomach twist. "We're running out of time," Corvin said bluntly. "The curse is accelerating. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it soon." "Then let's not waste time talking about it," Darian replied. He looked at Calith. "Ready?" She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. This time Corvin had prepared additional protections. Circles of salt and iron, crystals arranged in precise patterns, incantations written in languages Calith didn't understand. The room hummed with latent power before they even began. Darian took her hand. The pain hit immediately, but Calith was ready for it this time. She breathed through it, letting her magic rise to meet the curse without fighting. The 2 forces circled each other again, testing boundaries. "Deeper," Corvin instructed. "You need to go deeper. Touch the source of the curse, not just its surface." "How?" Calith gasped. "Stop thinking like a person. Think like the magic." That made no sense, but Calith tried anyway. She stopped focusing on the pain and instead followed the thread of connection between her magic and Darian's curse. It led down and down, through layers of his being she had no business accessing, memories, fears, the hollow spaces where emotions should be. And at the bottom, she found it, the Hollow One's mark. A cold, vast intelligence that noticed her immediately. Interesting. it said, though not in words. More like a concept pressed directly into her mind. You carry the old blood, the binding breakers, the ones we feared. Caliph tried to pull back, but the presence held her fast. He is mine, it said, given freely, sealed with royal blood. You cannot break what was willing. Watch me, Caliph snarled. She drove her magic forward like a spear, aiming for the heart of the binding. The hollow one laughed, a sound like glaciers cracking, and pushed back. The force of it threw Caliph across the room. She hit the wall hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Through blurred vision, she saw Darian collapse, convulsing on the floor. Corvin was shouting something, but the words were lost in the ringing in her ears. Caliph forced herself up. Her magic was still active, still angry, still fighting, even though she'd been physically separated from Darian. It wanted to go back, wanted to finish what it had started. Caliph, stop! Corvin grabbed her arm. You'll kill him! The curse is fighting back. If you push harder, it'll tear him apart rather than let go. She looked at Darian. Blood was leaking from his nose and ears. His eyes had rolled back. Whatever was happening inside him, it was destroying him. Caliph forced her magic to retreat, forced it down and down until it coiled back into sleep. The moment she did, Darian stopped convulsing. He lay still on the cold stone floor, breathing in ragged gasps. Corvin rushed to him, checking his pulse, his eyes, muttering medical terms Caliph didn't understand. Is he alive? She asked. Barely. Corvin's hands were shaking as he worked. Whatever you touched in there, it nearly killed both of you. It spoke to me. The thing that created the curse. It said Darian's ancestor gave himself willingly. Corvin's head snapped up. Willingly. That's what it said. That the deal was sealed with royal blood and consent. It said, I can't break what was willing. Caliph slumped against the wall, exhausted. So what do we do? If the curse was accepted voluntarily, how do we break it? I don't know. Corvin looked at Darian, who still hadn't moved. But we need to figure it out fast, because that thing in there, it's not going to let him go without a fight. Guards arrived to carry Darian to his chambers. Caliph watched them take him away. His body limped between them, and felt something crack inside her chest. She barely knew this man, didn't particularly like him, with his cold efficiency and emotionless calculations. But watching him suffer because she wasn't strong enough or smart enough to break the curse, that hollowed her out in ways she hadn't expected. Go rest, Corvin said quietly. We'll try again when he's recovered. And if he doesn't recover? Corvin didn't answer. Caliph didn't go back to her room. Instead, she found herself walking through the palace corridors, past sleeping servants and tired guards, until she reached the library. She pulled every book on ancient magic she could find and spread them across the table. There had to be something, some precedent, some loophole. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Caliph's eyes ached from reading by candlelight, but she didn't stop. You won't find the answer in there. She jerked upright. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, with auburn hair and the kind of beauty that came from good breeding and better cosmetics. Lady Meredith, the council member she'd seen arguing with Morella. The library is closed, Caliph said carefully. Not to council members. Meredith moved into the room with practiced grace, her silk dress whispering against the floor. I wanted to meet you properly, away from the king's watchful eye. Why? Because I want to help you. Caliph didn't believe that for a second. Help me do what? Save yourself. Meredith leaned against the table, her expression sympathetic in a way that felt calculated. You seem like a smart girl, smart enough to recognize a losing battle when you see one. What are you talking about? The curse. You can't break it. No one can. Dozens have tried over the centuries. All have failed. Meredith's voice dropped to something conspiratorial. But the king won't accept that. He'll keep pushing you, keep forcing these experiments, until one of them kills you both. So what do you suggest? Leave. Tonight. I can arrange safe passage out of Frostborn territory. Enough gold to start over somewhere warm and far away from all this ice and death. Caliph studied her. And in exchange, nothing. Just go. Before it's too late. You expect me to believe you're doing this out of kindness? Meredith's smile didn't reach her eyes. I expect you to be smart enough to take the exit when it's offered. The king is dying. The curse is winning. And when he falls, this entire kingdom will descend into civil war. Do you really want to be here when that happens? Why do you care if I'm here or not? Because you're a complication we don't need. The sympathy dropped from Meredith's voice like a discarded mask. The king brought you here against the council's advice. He's wasting resources on a fool's hope while real threats gather at our borders. Your presence here is destabilizing at a time when we need stability. There it was. The real reason. You want him to die, Calith said flatly. I want this kingdom to survive, and sometimes that requires difficult choices. Meredith straightened. Think about my offer. You have until dawn. She left as silently as she'd arrived. Calith sat alone in the library, surrounded by useless books and impossible choices. Part of her wanted to take the offer, wanted to run far away from this frozen hell and its dying king and its poisonous court politics. But another part, the part that sounded like her mother, whispered that running would solve nothing, that this curse was connected to something bigger, something that wouldn't stop with Darian's death. She thought about what Corvin had said, that her mother had warned of old magic waking up, of pacts fraying. What if the curse was just one symptom of something larger? The door opened again. Calith tensed, expecting Meredith to return. Instead, it was Garen, the young soldier who'd given her his cloak during the journey. He looked nervous. Miss Calith? The king is asking for you. Is he awake? Barely, but he says it's urgent. Calith followed Garen through the dark corridors to the royal chambers, a part of the palace she'd never seen. Guards stood at attention outside massive doors carved with frost patterns. Inside, the room was Spartan despite its size. A large bed, a desk covered in maps and reports, windows that looked out over the frozen mountains, and in the bed, propped against pillows, Darian looked worse than death. Leave us, he said to Garen. His voice was rough, damaged. The soldier bowed and left. Calith moved closer. You should be resting. I'll rest when I'm dead, which won't be long now. Darian's eyes, though exhausted, were sharp. Meredith came to see you. How did you... I have eyes everywhere. What did she offer you? Calith hesitated, then decided honesty was simpler. Safe passage out of here, gold. A chance to run before everything collapses. Smart offer? Are you taking it? No. Why not? Because I don't run anymore. I did that for 3 years after my mother died. Kept my head down, tried to be invisible, hoped they'd forget about me. It didn't work. Calith pulled a chair close to the bed. And because you were right, I'm a survivor. And survivors don't abandon fights just because they're hard. Something that might have been respect crossed Darian's face. Or maybe just exhaustion playing tricks with shadows. The curse won't break through force, he said quietly. You proved that today. It's too deeply rooted, too old. Then what do? We change tactics. Darian's gray eyes locked on hers. The curse was accepted willingly, which means it might be released willingly. You want to negotiate with the thing that's killing you? I want to understand what it wants, why it's still feeding after 300 years. Every contract has terms. Every binding has conditions. He shifted in the bed, wincing. We find those conditions, we might find a way out. And how exactly do we do that? We ask it. Darian's hand moved to hers, his skin ice cold. But this time, we go in together, fully. No holding back. We dive straight into the heart of the curse, and we make it talk. Calith's stomach dropped. That could kill us both. Yes. When? 3 days? I need that long to recover enough that I won't die immediately. His grip tightened slightly. And Calith? If this goes wrong, if I don't make it out, the kingdom needs someone strong. Someone who won't let the vultures tear it apart. That's not going to be me. I'm nobody here. You're the person who stood up to an entire pack and refused to break. You're your mother's daughter. Darian's eyes were starting to close despite his efforts to keep them open. That makes you more dangerous than most of the nobility combined. Remember that. He fell asleep mid-sentence, his hand still holding hers. Calith sat there in the darkness, listening to his labored breathing and thinking about impossible choices. about dying kings and hungry curses and the weight of a kingdom she'd never asked to carry. Outside, snow began to fall. Through the window, she could see it swirling against the glass like restless ghosts. 3 days. That's all they had left. 3 days felt like 3 minutes and 3 years at the same time. Calith spent the first day in the library poring over texts about ancient bindings and willing contracts. The second day, she trained with Garen in an empty courtyard, learning basic combat forms because sitting still made her want to scream. The third day, she didn't leave her room at all, just stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about all the ways diving into the curse could kill them both. The palace had grown tense. Whispers followed her everywhere now. Servants averted their eyes when she passed. Guards watched her with barely concealed suspicion. Word had spread about the failed experiment, about how the exile girl had nearly killed their king. Morella brought her meals personally, which Calith understood meant the paranoia was justified. Someone in this palace wanted her dead or gone, and food was the easiest weapon. "They're calling for a council vote," Morella said on the evening of the third day, setting down a tray of bread and soup. "Vastin and Meredith are pushing to have you expelled. They claim you're too dangerous to keep here." "When's the vote?" "Tomorrow afternoon. But it doesn't matter. The king has already said no." "He can do that?" "Technically, yes. But it makes him look weak, like he's choosing personal interest over the kingdom's safety." Morella's expression was grim. "They're trying to isolate him, make him seem unstable." "He is unstable. The curse—" "I know what the curse is doing." Morella's voice dropped. "I've watched it eat 3 kings, Darian's father, his uncle before that, his grandfather, all of them brilliant men who became hollow shells." She met Calith's eyes. "If you can actually save him, do it. Because if he falls, this kingdom falls with him." After Morella left, Calith picked at the soup without tasting it. The weight of expectation pressed down like physical force. She wasn't a hero, wasn't even particularly brave. She was just a girl who'd refused to kneel and somehow ended up holding the fate of a kingdom in her unprepared hands. A knock came at the door around midnight. Calith opened it to find Corvin, looking haggard and 10 years older than 3 days ago. "It's time," he said. The testing chamber had been transformed. The symbols on the floor had been redrawn in what looked like blood mixed with silver. Candles burned at precise intervals, their flames perfectly still despite the draft. And at the center, wearing simple dark clothes instead of his usual formal attire, stood Darian. He looked terrible and better at the same time. The gray had spread further, creeping up his neck toward his jaw. But his eyes were clear, focused, carrying a determination that bordered on reckless. "This is insane," Calith said, stopping at the edge of the circle. "We're going to die." "Probably," Darian agreed, "but we're out of other options." "There's always another option. We could run. We could—" "I'm not running from this." His voice was flat, final. 300 years my family has carried this curse. 300 years of slow death and hollow existence. It ends tonight, one way or another. Corvin was checking his instruments with shaking hands. "The protective wards are as strong as I can make them, but once you're both inside the curse, I can't help you. You'll be on your own." "Understood," Darian said. Calith wanted to protest, wanted to demand more time, more preparation, more anything. But she looked at Darian's gray skin and knew there was no more time. The curse was winning. In days, maybe hours, it would consume him completely. "Tell me the plan again," she said. "We link. Fully. No barriers between us. We ride your magic straight down to the source of the curse. And when we reach the Hollow One, we make it negotiate." Darian moved to the center of the circle. "It's a contract. Every contract can be renegotiated if you find the right leverage." "And what's our leverage?" "Me. I'm the last Frost, the last viable heir to the bloodline. If I die, the curse loses its anchor in this world. It'll have to find a new host, start over from scratch. That takes time and energy." Darian's eyes held hers. "We make it understand that releasing me is easier than losing 300 years of investment. That's assuming it thinks like we do, assuming it cares about efficiency. It accepted a contract once. That means it can think in terms of cost and benefit." Darian held out his hand. "Last chance to run." Calith looked at that hand, scarred and gray and offering nothing but pain and probable death. She took it. Let's go negotiate with a nightmare. The pain hit immediately, but this time Kalith didn't fight it. She let her magic rise and tangle with the curse, let them spiral together down into the depths of Darian's soul, down past memories of childhood and war and endless cold, down past the hollow spaces where love and fear should have lived, down to the source. The Hollow One was waiting. It manifested as absence more than presence, a vast emptiness that somehow had consciousness, had intent. When it spoke, the words bypassed language entirely and burned themselves directly into thought. You return. Foolish. We're here to talk, Kalith said, or thought, or whatever communication was in this place. There is nothing to discuss. The contract is sealed. The price is paid. The king is mine. The king is dying, Darian's voice cut through the void, which means you lose your anchor. I will find another. Not for 300 years, not without starting over, not without risking that the next bloodline won't be as cooperative as mine was. Darian's presence in this space was cold and sharp as broken glass. Or you could cut your losses, release me, end the contract cleanly. The Hollow One's attention shifted, focusing on them with the weight of mountains. Kalith felt her magic straining under the pressure, threatening to crack. And what do I gain from this? Renegotiation? What do you want? Kalith demanded. The original contract gave you a king's emotions, his humanity. What are you actually feeding on? The response came with something that might have been amusement, suffering, isolation, the slow death of hope. I feed on the gap between what you are and what you were meant to be. The void seemed to pulse. But you know this, Binding Breaker. Your mother understood. That's why they killed her. Kalith's magic flared with sudden fury. What do you know about my mother? Everything. She was bound to me as well. Different contract, same source. The Hollow One's attention turned fully on her. Did you think you stumbled into this by accident? You carry my mark too, little breaker. Have since birth. Your mother made a deal to save her pack, and you were the price. The words hit like physical blows. Kalith felt Darian's presence steady her, keep her from fragmenting entirely. You're lying, she said. I do not lie. I am far older than lies. The void expanded. Your mother traded your freedom for power. Power to protect the Silver Fang from threats you never saw, because she succeeded. And when she tried to break that binding, tried to free you from the fate she'd chosen, they executed her for it. Everything clicked into place with horrible clarity, the forbidden magic. The ritual in the old temple. The way the council had moved so quickly to kill her mother without trial. They'd known. They'd known what her mother was trying to do. The binding, Kalith said slowly, the one she broke before she died. That was mine. Yes, she shattered it with her last breath, freed you. But the council couldn't allow that knowledge to spread, couldn't let anyone know they'd been complicit in binding a child to something like me. The Hollow One's presence swelled, so they burned her, called it treason, and cast you out the moment you came of age. Rage flooded through Kalith, white-hot and pure. Her magic exploded outward, attacking the Hollow One with everything she had. Kalith, stop! Darian's voice cut through the fury. That's what it wants! But she couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. This thing had held her in chains her entire life, had consumed her mother's life trying to free her, had eaten away at Darian's humanity for 300 years. She was going to burn it out by the roots. Her magic drove deeper into the curse, tearing at its foundations. The Hollow One shrieked, a sound that existed outside hearing, pure distilled agony transmitted directly to the mind. Kalith! Darian was there beside her, his presence wrapping around hers. If you destroy it like this, you'll destroy me too. She knew, part of her knew, but the rage was too big, too consuming. Then Darian did something she didn't expect. He stopped fighting, stopped trying to protect himself, just opened completely, showing her everything, every memory, every fear, every tiny fragment of emotion he'd managed to hold on to despite the curse. She saw his father's death, saw the moment he'd realized the curse was accelerating in him faster than previous generations, saw him methodically pushing away everyone who might have cared about him, because losing people hurt less than watching them watch him fade. She saw loneliness so vast it made the Hollow One's void look small. And underneath it all, she saw something else. Something new and fragile and growing despite the curse's best efforts to smother it. He cared about her. Not as a tool, not as a solution, but as a person. The realization shocked her out of the rage. Kalith pulled her magic back, breathing hard, her presence trembling in this strange space. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be." Darian's voice was rough. "Use it, but aim correctly." The Hollow One was wounded, weakened by her assault. It had drawn back, coiling in on itself defensively. "Impressive," it said. "Your mother's daughter indeed, but insufficient. I have survived worse." "I'm not trying to survive anymore," Kalith said. She looked at Darian's presence, saw the trust there, saw him giving her permission to try something desperate. "I'm changing the terms." She drove her magic forward again, but this time not to destroy. This time to connect. She grabbed the threads of the curse binding Darian and the threads of the broken binding that had once held her, and she wove them together. "What are you doing?" The Hollow One's voice held surprise. Maybe fear. "Making a new contract," Kalith said. "You want to feed on the gap between what someone is and what they could be? Fine. Feed on me instead. Transfer the curse from Darian to me. I'll carry it." "Kalith, no," Darian started. "I can handle it. My mother trained me for this without me even knowing. The binding breaker magic, it's made for this. Made to interface with things like you." Kalith felt the weave taking shape under her hands. "You lose nothing. Gain a host whose magic is actually compatible instead of fighting you every step. Darian goes free. And what does he offer in return? His bloodline, his kingdom, a promise that the Frostborn will never hunt your kind again, will never try to banish or destroy entities like you." She felt Darian's shock, but he didn't contradict her. "You get safety and a willing host. We get his freedom and time to figure out how to break this properly." The Hollow One was silent for a long moment. Then, "Acceptable. But understand, Binding Breaker, once you carry this curse, it will change you. Hollow you. You may become what you hate most. I'll take that risk." "Very well." The transfer happened in an instant. Kalith felt the curse uncoil from Darian and slam into her like a physical blow. Cold rushed through her veins, turning her blood to ice. The magic that had been slowly killing him now turned its full attention on her, and it was hungry. Darian's presence in the void suddenly blazed with light as the curse released him. 300 years of accumulated damage began to reverse, color returning, emotions flooding back in a cascade that made him gasp. "Kalith, get out!" She gritted through clenched teeth. "While you still can." She felt him hesitate, felt him reaching for her. "I won't leave you here. You have to. Someone needs to survive this." Kalith's presence was already starting to fracture under the curse's weight. "Get out, save your kingdom, and find a way to break this before it breaks me. I swear. Go!" She shoved him with everything she had left, felt his presence rip away from hers, pulled back toward consciousness and life and freedom. The last thing she heard was him screaming her name. Then she was alone with the Hollow One, and the curse settled over her like a burial shroud. Kalith woke to chaos. She was on the floor of the testing chamber, her body convulsing. Corvin was shouting orders. Guards were flooding into the room, and across the circle, Darian was sitting up, his skin its normal color, his eyes blazing silver with emotions he hadn't felt in years. "Get her stabilized," he roared, lurching toward Kalith, but the moment he touched her, frost spread from her skin to his. He jerked back with a curse. "Don't," Kalith managed to say. Her voice didn't sound like her own. Too cold, too hollow. "The curse is too volatile right now. Give it time to settle." "How much time?" "I don't know." She could feel it worming through her, testing her defenses, learning her. Hours, maybe days. Darian's face was a mask of fury and anguish, emotions he probably hadn't experienced in decades hitting him all at once. "You shouldn't have done that. Didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice. Not this time." Kalith forced herself to sit up. The room spun, but she focused through it. "You're free. Use it. Because if I can't control this thing, you're going to have to kill me before it spreads." "I'm not killing you." "Then you'll watch it consume me and everyone around me. Your choice." Before Darian could respond, the doors slammed open. Lord Vastine strode in with a full contingent of armed guards, his face twisted with rage. "Arrest them both," he commanded. "The king has violated the council's direct prohibition on forbidden magic, and that creature has assaulted him with dark arts." "I'm standing right here," Darian said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "and I'm ordering you to stand down. You're compromised. The curse has clearly affected your judgment." "The curse is gone, Vastin. She took it from me." Darian stepped between Calith and the guards, his posture radiating threat. "Which means I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 10 years, clear enough to recognize a coup attempt when I see one." Vastin's hand went to his sword. "This is not a coup. This is the council exercising its authority. The council has authority over policy, not over the king's person or his guests." Darian's eyes were hard. "You want to challenge that? Draw your sword. Let's settle this the old way." The room went silent. Everyone knew what the old way meant. Trial by combat. Winner takes everything. Vastin was a skilled fighter, but Darian was the Alpha King, and now he had all his emotions back, including the fury that had been buried under the curse for years. "You wouldn't dare," Vastin said. "Not in your condition. My condition is better than it's been in a decade. Test me." The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Vastin's eyes shifted to Calith. "Even if we allow your recovery, she remains a threat. The dark magic she carries is controlled," Calith said, forcing herself to her feet. The curse writhed inside her, but she shoved it down. "I'm not your enemy, Lord Vastin. I'm trying to save your king. By taking the curse yourself? That's not salvation, girl. That's just transferring the problem." "Then I'll be the problem instead of him." Calith met his gaze without flinching. "You wanted the curse gone from your king? Done. You wanted him restored to full capacity? Done. What else do you want? Your expulsion, your execution, proof that this kingdom isn't so weak it accepts dangerous foreign magic in its heart." "Enough." Darian's voice cracked like a whip. "Calith Varn is under my protection. Anyone who moves against her moves against me. Is that clear?" Vastin's face went purple. "The council will hear of this. The council can hear whatever it wants. I'll be there tomorrow to address them personally. Now get out." For a moment, Vastin looked like he might actually draw his sword. His hand trembled on the hilt, rage warring with self-preservation. Then Lady Meredith appeared in the doorway, her expression calculating. "Lord Vastin," she said smoothly, "perhaps we should reconvene and discuss this with cooler heads." "There's nothing to discuss." "I disagree." Meredith's eyes moved between Darian and Calith. "The situation has changed. We need to reassess." She was playing a longer game. Calith could see it in her eyes. Vastin wanted immediate violence. Meredith wanted strategic advantage. Vastin saw it too. He stepped back, hand falling from his sword. "This isn't over." "It never is," Darian said coldly. The council members withdrew, taking their guards with them. The moment they were gone, Darian sagged against the wall, the color draining from his face. "Easy," Corvin said, moving to support him. "You're experiencing emotional whiplash, years of suppressed feelings hitting all at once. You need to rest. I need to fix this." Darian looked at Calith. "We need to break the curse completely, before it destroys you." "We will," Calith lied. She could already feel the curse adapting to her, learning her patterns. It was strong, stronger than she'd expected. "But right now, you need to solidify your position. Vastin and Meredith are going to use this to undermine you." "Let them try." "Darian." She moved closer, carefully not touching him. "You're feeling things again. That's good. But it also makes you vulnerable. They'll use your attachment to me against you." "I don't care. You should, because if they force you to choose between me and your kingdom, we both know what you'll have to choose." His jaw clenched. "There has to be another way." "Then we find it, together. But first, we survive tomorrow's council meeting." The council chamber was a circular room deep in the palace, with seats arranged in tiers like a theater. 50 council members attended, representing the kingdom's major families and territories. They sat in a semicircle, with the king's throne at the focal point. Calith stood beside Darian as he addressed them, trying to ignore the hostile stares and whispered conversations. The curse inside her was restless, agitated by the concentration of fear and anger in the room. I've called this emergency session to address rumors and set facts straight, Darian began. His voice was steady, but Caliph could see the strain in his shoulders. 3 days ago, I underwent a procedure to remove the blood curse that has plagued our family for 300 years. That procedure was successful. The curse is gone. Immediate uproar, council members shouting over each other, demanding explanations. Vastin's voice cut through the chaos. At what cost? You've brought forbidden magic into our stronghold, endangered every person in this kingdom. I've freed this kingdom from a curse that has crippled every king since Aldrich Frost. Darian's eyes swept the chamber. How many of you remember my father? How he became a hollow shell in his final years, incapable of joy or sorrow or any human connection? Several council members shifted uncomfortably. They remembered. That curse would have consumed me too. Within a year, I would have become what he was. Useless as a ruler, empty as a vessel. And you all would have fought over the scraps of this kingdom while I sat on my throne, technically alive but functionally dead. Darian's voice hardened. Caliph Varn gave me a chance to avoid that fate. I took it. Meredith stood, her silk dress rustling. And now she carries that curse, walks among us with dark magic in her veins. How is that better? Because she can control it, Darian said. Her bloodline is specifically suited to interfacing with this type of magic. It won't consume her the way it would have consumed me. You can't know that, Vastin interjected. And even if it's true, she remains a foreign element. An exile from Silverfang with no loyalty to Frostborn. She has more loyalty than some people born here, Darian shot back. She risked her life to save mine. What have you done for this kingdom lately, Vastin? Besides try to organize a coup the moment you thought I was weak? Vastin's face went scarlet. That is a baseless accusation. Is it? You brought armed guards to a private testing chamber, issued arrest orders for your king. In what world is that not sedition? The chamber erupted again. Some council members looked shocked. Others looked guilty. A few looked calculatingly neutral, waiting to see which side would win before committing. Caliph felt the curse surge inside her, feeding on the conflict. She gritted her teeth and shoved it down, but it was getting harder. The thing was learning, adapting. Enough! An old woman stood in the highest tier. Elder Rian, one of the oldest council members, respected by everyone. We can argue loyalties and accusations all day, but the fundamental question remains, is the girl dangerous? All eyes turned to Caliph. She stepped forward. Yes. The word fell like a stone into water, ripples spreading. I'm dangerous, Caliph continued. I carry magic that could kill everyone in this room if I lost control. I'm dangerous in the same way fire is dangerous, in the same way winter is dangerous, in the same way any powerful force is dangerous when mishandled. Then why should we allow you to stay? Rian asked, not unkindly. Because I'm also the only one who can interface with this curse safely. The only one who can eventually break it completely. The king is free now, but the magic itself still exists, still needs to be dealt with. Caliph met the old woman's eyes. I'm your best chance to end this permanently. But I understand if you'd rather expel me and hope the problem goes away on its own. Hope is not a strategy, Rian said dryly. Neither is fear, Caliph replied. But fear is what the curse feeds on, what it wants. The more you're afraid of me, the stronger it gets. Meredith laughed, the sound bitter. So we're supposed to just trust you? Trust that you won't lose control and slaughter us all? No, I'm asking you to trust your king's judgment. To trust that he wouldn't stake his kingdom on a losing bet. Caliph glanced at Darian. And to give me time to prove I can handle this. The chamber fell silent as council members exchanged looks, having silent conversations with glances and subtle gestures. Finally, Rian spoke. I propose a compromise. The girl stays, but under strict supervision. She will be monitored at all times, restricted from sensitive areas of the palace, and if she shows any signs of losing control, she will be expelled immediately. Or executed, Vastin added. Or expelled, Rian said firmly. We are not barbarians, Vastin. We don't kill people for what they might do. All in favor? Darian asked. More than half the hands went up. Not an overwhelming majority, but enough. Motion carries, Darian said. Caliph Varn remains under my protection, subject to the stated restrictions. Vastin stood abruptly and stormed out, his supporters following. Meredith lingered a moment longer, her expression unreadable, then departed with a graceful bow. When the chamber finally cleared, leaving only Darian, Calith, and Corvin, the weight of it all crashed down. "That went better than expected," Corvin said, though he looked exhausted. "Half the council wants me dead," Calith pointed out. "Only half. I'd call that progress." Darian was silent, his jaw tight. Calith could see emotions playing across his face. Anger, frustration, something that might have been fear. He was still adjusting to feeling things again. "We need to work faster," he said finally. "Find a way to break the curse before Vastin makes another move." "Agreed," Corvin said. "I have some theories. Old texts that reference binding breaker magic. If we can understand how Calith's mother shattered her binding, we might be able to replicate it." "How long?" "Days, maybe weeks." "We don't have weeks." Darian looked at Calith. "How long can you hold it?" She wanted to lie, wanted to say she could hold it indefinitely, but the curse was already whispering in the back of her mind, showing her visions of what she could become. Cold, empty, powerful. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's fighting me, testing my limits. It wants to spread." "Then we stop it from spreading," Darian said. "Starting now. Corvin, clear my schedule. We're going back to the testing chamber. We're going to tear this curse apart piece by piece until we understand how to kill it." "That's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. At least this way we're being proactive." They were halfway to the testing chamber when the attack came. Calith felt it a split second before it happened, a wrongness in the air, a distortion in the flow of magic around them. She grabbed Darian and yanked him sideways just as a crossbow bolt buried itself in the wall where his head had been. "Ambush!" Corvin shouted. Guards appeared from hidden alcoves, but these weren't palace guards. They wore no insignia, no identifying marks. Assassins. Darian drew his sword with speed that spoke of decades of training, emotion-fueled reflexes now firing at full capacity. He cut down the first attacker before the man could reload. Calith felt the curse surge inside her, demanding to be used. It showed her exactly how to kill, where to strike, how to move, which arteries to open. The knowledge was horrifying and intoxicating. She shoved it down. "Stay behind me," Darian ordered, putting himself between Calith and the attackers. But there were too many. 8, 10, more flooding into the corridor, professional killers with cold eyes and coordinated movements. One lunged at Calith. She dodged on instinct, but he was fast, his blade scoring her arm. Blood welled, hot against her cold skin. The curse exploded. Frost spread from Calith's feet in a wave, coating the floor, the walls, the assassins. They froze mid-attack, their bodies locked in ice so cold it burned. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in 3 seconds. Calith stood at the center of it, her hands coated in frost, her eyes reflecting silver. "Calith," Darian said carefully. "Come back." She could barely hear him over the curse's whisper. It wanted more, wanted to freeze everything, wanted to spread until the entire palace was a tomb of ice and silence. "Fight it," Darian said, moving closer. "I know you can hear me. Fight." "Can't," she gasped. "It's too strong." "Yes, you can. You're stronger than any curse. You proved that when you refused to kneel, when you survived 3 years alone, when you took this burden from me." He was right in front of her now, his breath frosting in the frigid air. "You are your mother's daughter, and she was the strongest person I ever met." "You never met her." "I did. Once. 10 years ago she came to this palace asking for help breaking a binding. I turned her away because I was already too far into the curse to care about anything." Darian's voice cracked. "If I'd helped her then, maybe she'd still be alive. Maybe none of this would have happened. I can't change that. But I can help you now, so fight this thing. Come back." Calith focused on his voice, used it as an anchor. Slowly, painfully, she dragged the curse back under control. The frost stopped spreading. The temperature began to climb. The frozen assassins stood like statues, dead or unconscious. She couldn't tell. "That's it," Darian said softly. "You've got it." Calith collapsed. Darian caught her, his arms solid and warm. For a moment she just let herself be held, too exhausted to care about protocol or propriety. "Who sent them?" she asked. "I have a good idea." Darian's voice was cold. "Corvin, get her to safety. I'm going to have a conversation with Lord Vastin." "Wait," Calith said. "It wasn't just Vastin. The attack was too coordinated, too well funded. Someone else is pulling strings. Who? Before she could answer, Morella came running down the corridor, her face pale. My lord, the northern watchtowers are reporting movement. An army, approaching fast. Darian's expression went deadly. Who? Silverfang Pack, 300 strong, and they're flying war banners. Calith's blood went cold for reasons that had nothing to do with the curse. They've come for me, she said. Let them come, Darian said. They'll find I'm not so easy to intimidate anymore. You don't understand. If Silverfang is here, it means the council convinced them I'm a threat, that the curse could spread from me to them. Calith pulled away from him, standing on shaking legs. They're not here to negotiate. They're here to execute me before I become what my mother was. Then we fight. Against my own people? They stop being your people the moment they cast you out. Darian's eyes blazed. You're Frostborn now, and we protect our own. Alarm bells began ringing throughout the palace. Soldiers rushed to defensive positions. The fortress that had seemed so imposing and secure suddenly felt like a trap. Calith moved to the window and looked out at the mountains. In the distance, she could see torches, hundreds of them, moving through the snow like a river of fire. The Silverfang Pack was coming, and somewhere behind them, someone was orchestrating this entire catastrophe. Someone who wanted Darian weakened, Calith dead, and the Frostborn kingdom in chaos. Someone who'd been planning this long before Calith ever arrived. She pressed her hand against the frozen glass and felt the curse pulse in response, hungry and waiting. Whatever happened next, blood was going to spill. The only question was whose. The war room filled within minutes. Captains and advisors crowded around the central table where a hastily drawn map showed the Silverfang army's position. 300 wolves against the Frostborn's garrison of maybe 400, but the attackers had momentum and the element of surprise. They'll reach the outer walls by dawn, Captain Thorne reported. He was a grizzled veteran with a missing eye and hands that didn't shake even now. We can hold them for a while, but if they have siege equipment, they don't, Calith said. Every head turned toward her. Silverfang doesn't use siege weapons. They overwhelm through speed and numbers. Hit hard, hit fast, break through before defenders can organize. You seem very certain, Vastin said from the corner where he'd been lurking. He hadn't been arrested yet, though Darian's eyes promised that was coming. Almost like you planned this. I grew up Silverfang. I know how they fight. Calith leaned over the map, tracing likely approach routes. They'll send skirmishers first to test defenses. Then the main force will hit whatever point seems weakest. They're betting on panic and confusion. And how do we counter that? Darian asked. We don't panic, and we hit them where they're not expecting resistance. She pointed to a narrow pass east of the main gates. This choke point, they'll try to flank through here. If we position archers and block their retreat, we can turn their own momentum against them. Thorne studied the map, his good eye narrowed. That could work, but we'd need someone who knows their patterns. Someone they wouldn't expect to be giving us intelligence. I'll do it, Calith said. Absolutely not, Darian said immediately. You're staying inside the fortress where it's safe. Safe from what? The army coming to kill me specifically? They're here because of me, Darian. I'm not hiding while your people die defending me. You're also carrying a curse that nearly froze an entire corridor an hour ago. What happens if you lose control in the middle of battle? Calith met his eyes. Then I aim it at the enemy instead of you. The room went silent. Several advisors looked horrified. Thorne looked calculating. And Darian looked torn between 6 different emotions he was still learning to process. That's exactly what they want, Corvin said quietly. They want you to use the curse. Want you to prove you're the monster they're claiming you are. Maybe I am a monster now. Calith felt the curse shift inside her, pleased by the acknowledgement. But I'd rather be a useful monster than a useless victim. There has to be another way, Darian said. There isn't. Not one that doesn't end with massive casualties on both sides. Calith straightened. But I might have a third option. One that doesn't require fighting at all. Vastin snorted. You're going to negotiate with an army that wants you dead? No, I'm going to give them what they came for. She looked at Darian. Me. On my terms. The objections came immediately, overlapping and loud, but Calith held up her hand. Listen, they came because they believe I'm dangerous. Believe the curse could spread from me to them, start an epidemic of dark magic. What if I prove I can control it? Prove I'm not the threat they think I am? How? Darian demanded. By walking out there alone. No weapons, no guards. Just me and the curse. Calith's heart was pounding, but her voice stayed steady. If I lose control, they kill me and the problem is solved. If I don't, they have to reconsider their assumptions. That's suicide, Thorn said flatly. That's strategy. The Silver Fang respects strength and courage. They'll respect someone who faces them head-on more than someone who hides behind walls. Darian slammed his hand on the table. I am not sending you out there to die. You're not sending me anywhere. I'm choosing to go. Calith moved around the table to face him directly. You said I was Frostborn now, that you protect your own. Well, this is me protecting my people, both sets of them. Something cracked in Darian's expression, the fear he was trying to hide. The connection between them that had formed during those moments linked together in the curse's depths. If anything happens to you, he started, then you'll have to find another impossible solution to an impossible problem. You're good at that. Calith managed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Trust me, I survived 3 years of exile. I can survive one conversation. This is insane, Vastin said. The council will never approve. The council doesn't get a vote, Darian said, his voice dropping into something cold and absolute. This is a military decision. My decision. He looked at Calith. If you're going out there, you're going with backup, archers on the walls, cavalry ready to charge if things go wrong. Fine, but they stay back unless I signal. If Silverfang sees an aggressive posture, this won't work. Thorn was already barking orders, sending runners to position troops. The room emptied rapidly, leaving just Darian, Calith, and Corvin. You have a plan for controlling the curse during this confrontation? Corvin asked. Working on it. That's not reassuring. Nothing about this is reassuring. Calith touched the frozen spot on her arm where the curse had manifested earlier. The skin was still cold, still gray. But I've been thinking about what happened with the assassins. The curse responded to threat, to fear. What if I can channel it deliberately instead of letting it explode randomly? That's dangerous, Corvin said. Everything about me is dangerous now. Might as well make it useful. Darian was silent, staring at the map. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I can't lose you. The words hung in the air between them. Calith felt something warm unfurl in her chest, fighting against the curse's cold. You won't, she said, hoping it was true. Promise me. I promise I'll do everything I can to come back. It was the most honest answer she could give. Darian looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw everything he was feeling written across his face. Fear. Anger. Something deeper that neither of them had words for yet. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her into a fierce embrace. Calith stiffened for a second, then relaxed into it, her face pressed against his chest. He was warm, alive, everything the curse wasn't. Come back, he said against her hair. I will. He pulled back just far enough to look at her. Then, without asking permission, he kissed her. The curse recoiled, hissing in the back of Calith's mind. It hated warmth, hated connection, but she shoved it down and kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into that moment. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Corvin was politely studying the ceiling. I'll just prepare some protective wards, he said, backing toward the door. Take your time. He left. Calith laughed shakily. That was overdue, Darian finished. I've wanted to do that since you told the council you were dangerous. You have terrible taste in timing. Apparently, his thumb traced her cheekbone. But if you die out there, I needed you to know. Know what? That you're not alone. That you matter. That someone gives a damn whether you survive this. His eyes held hers. Come back to me, Calith. Please. I will, she said again. And this time, she meant it as a vow. But the Silverfang army was camped 2 miles from the Frostborn walls when Calith rode out alone just before dawn. She'd refused armor, refused weapons, refused everything except the simple dark clothes she'd been wearing. The curse was her only protection now, coiled inside her like a sleeping serpent. The ride felt longer than it was. Every step her horse took echoed with finality. Behind her, the Frostborn fortress was lit up like a constellation, every torch burning, every wall manned. Ahead, the Silverfang camp sprawled across the snowy plain, hundreds of tents and thousands of torches. She could feel eyes on her from both sides, her own people watching from the walls, her former people watching from their camp. A patrol intercepted her halfway. "Caleth Varn," the lead rider said. She recognized him. Brennan, one of the pack's best trackers. They'd hunted together as children. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both?" His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "The council will want to see you." "That's what I'm here for." They escorted her into the camp. Wolves watched from every direction, their expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Caleth kept her head up, her shoulders back, refusing to show fear. The council tent was at the center of the camp. Caleth dismounted and walked inside, flanked by guards. Elder Morven sat at the head of a curved table, flanked by 4 other council members. All of them looked older than she remembered, worn down by the harshness of frontier life. "Caleth Varn," Morven said, "you have nerve showing your face here. You marched an army to my doorstep. Seemed rude not to greet you personally." Caleth stood in the center of the tent, hands loose at her sides. "Why are you here, Elder?" "You know why. The dark magic you carry. The curse. It's a threat to every pack in the region." "How do you know about the curse?" Morven's eyes shifted slightly. "We have sources." "Sources." Caleth let the word hang. "Let me guess. Someone approached you, told you I was dangerous, told you the curse could spread, convinced you to mobilize an army and march on the Frostborn sovereignty. The information was credible. The information was planted by someone who wants Frostborn and Silverfang to tear each other apart." Caleth stepped closer to the table. "Think about it. When have we ever mobilized like this? We're a frontier pack. We survive by staying mobile, staying hidden. This kind of open aggression isn't our style. The threat warranted? The threat is being manipulated by someone with resources and connections beyond what a simple pack should have." Caleth looked at each council member in turn. "Who approached you? Who gave you this information?" Silence. Then one of the younger council members, a woman named Sarah, who'd always been more pragmatic than ideological, spoke up. "A representative from the Southern Coalition said they had intelligence about forbidden magic spreading from the Frostborn territory. Said if we didn't act, we'd be complicit in whatever disasters followed." The Southern Coalition. A loose alliance of packs that had always resented Frostborn power. Caleth felt pieces clicking into place. "And you believed them without verification?" "They had proof," Morven said defensively. "Reports of strange magical incidents, testimonies from refugees. The evidence was compelling." "The evidence was fabricated." Caleth's voice hardened. "I am carrying a curse." "That part is true. But it's contained, controlled. I took it from the Alpha King to save his life, and I've been managing it ever since. There have been no incidents, no spread, no danger to anyone who doesn't actively attack me." "Then prove it," Sarah said. "Demonstrate this control you claim to have." Caleth's heart skipped. This was the moment, the risk she'd been planning to take. "Fine. But if I do, you withdraw your army, you go home, and you start asking harder questions about who's really pulling strings here." Morven's face hardened. "You're in no position to make demands. I'm in every position. Your army is camped 2 miles from a fortified position held by the most dangerous fighters in the north. If this turns into actual warfare, you lose. Best case scenario, you lose half your fighters and achieve nothing. Worst case, the Frostborn wipe you out and Silverfang Pack ceases to exist." Caleth kept her voice level. "Or I prove I'm not a threat, you go home with honor intact, and we all live to fight another day. Your choice." The council members exchanged looks. Finally, Morven stood. "Very well, show us this control." Caleth closed her eyes and reached for the curse. It surged up immediately, eager to be used. She could feel its hunger, its desire to spread and consume and freeze everything in its path. Instead of fighting it, she shaped it. Frost spread from her feet in a perfect circle, 10 feet in diameter. The temperature dropped but didn't plummet. Ice formed in delicate patterns on the ground, beautiful and precise. And at the center, Calith stood with her eyes silver and her hands glowing with cold light. "I can make this spread," she said quietly. "Can freeze your entire camp in seconds. Can turn every tent, every weapon, every person into ice sculptures. The curse wants me to do that. Wants me to give in to the cold and the emptiness." The council members had gone pale. Guards had their hands on weapons but hadn't drawn them. "But I choose not to," Calith continued, "because I'm not what you think I am. Not a monster. Not a threat. Just someone trying to survive in a world that's been trying to kill me since the day my mother died." She pulled the curse back. The frost retreated. The temperature normalized. And Calith stood there, breathing hard but in control. "That's impossible," Morven whispered. "My mother could do impossible things. Apparently I inherited the talent." Calith met his eyes. "She died trying to break a binding that would have destroyed me. Died trying to free me from exactly this kind of curse. And you killed her for it without ever asking why. Your mother was a traitor. My mother was trying to protect her daughter from people who traded her freedom for political convenience." Calith's voice cracked. "You want to know what binding she broke? It was mine. Something the council did when I was born. Traded me to an ancient entity in exchange for protection from threats I never saw because she succeeded in stopping them." Sarah stood abruptly. "That's not true. The council would never—" "Ask Morven," Calith said. "Ask him about the Pact of 20 years. About the deal made with the Hollow One to protect Silverfang territory from the Eastern Raiders." Morven's face had gone gray. "How do you know about that?" "Because the Hollow One told me. When I took the curse from Darien, I spoke directly to the entity my mother was fighting. It told me everything." Calith felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. "She died trying to save me from a fate you condemned me to, and you called it treason." The tent was silent. Even the guards looked uncertain now. "If this is true," Sarah said slowly, "if the council truly bound a child to an ancient entity without consent, that's not protection. That's sacrifice." "It was necessary," Morven said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The raiders would have destroyed us. We had no choice." "There's always a choice," Calith said. "My mother made hers. She chose to break the binding and free me, knowing it would cost her life. I'm making mine now. I'm choosing to control this curse instead of being controlled by it, and I'm choosing to expose the people who are using both our pacts as pawns." "What people?" Sarah demanded. "The Southern Coalition representatives who gave you intelligence, who convinced you to march on Frostborn, who wanted us fighting each other instead of paying attention to what they're really doing." Calith pulled a folded paper from her pocket, a document Corvin had found in the palace archives. "The Coalition has been buying up territory along the border, consolidating power. They want Frostborn and Silverfang to destroy each other so they can move in and claim what's left." She tossed the document on the table. Sarah picked it up and read, her expression growing darker. "This is extensive," she said. "Land purchases, mercenary contracts, supply routes. They've been planning this for months. While we've been focused on old grudges and invented threats, they've been positioning themselves to take everything." Calith looked at Morven. "You were played. We all were. The old elder sank back into his chair, looking every one of his 70 years. "If this is true, it's true. And if you don't believe me, send scouts to verify. Check the Coalition's troop movements. See where their resources are actually flowing." Calith straightened. "Or you can waste more time trying to kill me and let them win." Sarah was already moving, calling for messengers. The other council members were arguing in hushed voices. The certainty that had brought them here was crumbling. "Why should we trust you?" Morven asked quietly. "You're Frostborn now. Your loyalty is to them." "My loyalty is to the truth," Calith said, "and to making sure my mother's death meant something. She died trying to break corrupt systems that trade children for power. I'm not letting her sacrifice be for nothing." She turned and walked toward the tent entrance, then paused. "And for what it's worth, Elder, I forgive you. All of you. You did what you thought you had to do to protect the pack. It was wrong. It killed my mother and nearly destroyed me, but I understand survival sometimes requires terrible choices." She looked back at them. "Just try to make better ones going forward." She walked out of the tent into the pre-dawn light. The camp was stirring, wolves emerging from tents to see what was happening. Calith could feel their eyes on her, their uncertainty. Brennan appeared at her side. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest." "Both, remember?" He almost smiled. The council is going to need time to verify your claims, to send scouts. It could take days. Then I suggest they hurry, because the coalition won't wait forever before making their next move. Will you stay? Help us figure this out? Calith looked toward the Frostborn fortress, barely visible in the morning mist. Darian would be watching, waiting. I have my own problems to solve, she said, but if you need information, you know where to find me. Assuming the council doesn't decide to attack anyway. They won't. You shook them, made them question everything. Brennan paused. For what it's worth, I never believed you were a monster, even when they cast you out. Then you should have said something. I know. I'm sorry. It was a start. Not enough to fix everything, but a start. Calith mounted her horse and rode back toward Frostborn. Behind her, the Silverfang camp was in chaos, arguments breaking out as the council's control fractured. Ahead, the fortress gates opened to receive her. Darian was waiting at the gate with Garen and half the garrison. The moment Calith dismounted, he was there, pulling her into another fierce embrace. You're alive, he said against her hair. I promised, didn't I? You promised to try. I was prepared for worse. He pulled back just far enough to look at her. What happened? I told them the truth, showed them the curse, made them question who their real enemy is. Calith leaned into him, suddenly exhausted. They're not going to attack. Not yet, anyway. They need time to verify what I told them. And if they verify it, then Silverfang becomes an ally instead of an enemy, and we focus on the real threat. Darian's expression hardened. The Southern Coalition. They've been playing us all, using old grudges and invented threats to position themselves for a power grab. Calith accepted water from Garen and drank deeply. We need to expose them before they can make their move. Agreed. But first, you need rest. Darian's hand found hers. You just faced down an entire army alone. You're allowed to collapse now. Calith wanted to argue, wanted to dive immediately into strategy and planning, but her body was betraying her, exhaustion seeping into every muscle. Fine. But tomorrow we start working on breaking this curse for good. I'm tired of carrying it around. Tomorrow, Darian agreed. He led her back into the fortress, his hand never leaving hers. Behind them, the sun was rising over the mountains, turning the snow gold and pink. A new day, a new chance. And for the first time since her mother's death, Calith felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Hope. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Silverfang scouts verified Calith's claims and found evidence of coalition manipulation throughout the region. Other packs started reporting similar experiences. Mysterious representatives offering intelligence, stirring up old conflicts, positioning everyone against each other. A pattern emerged. The coalition had been orchestrating chaos for months, maybe years, and they'd nearly succeeded. In the Frostborn Palace, Calith worked with Corvin to understand the curse more deeply. They discovered that her mother's binding breaker magic wasn't just about destroying old contracts. It was about understanding them so completely that they could be rewritten. Your mother didn't just shatter your binding, Corvin explained one evening in the library. She transformed it, turned it from a chain into a key. That's why you can interface with the curse. You carry the pattern of transformation in your blood. So I can transform the curse, theoretically, change its fundamental nature from consumption to something else. That's not very specific. Because we're in uncharted territory. No one's tried this before. But the more Calith experimented, the more she understood. The curse wanted to consume because that's what it was designed to do. But design could be altered. Purpose could be redirected. She started small. Instead of fighting the curse when it surged, she channeled it into useful forms. Frost that could preserve food, ice that could seal wounds, cold that could slow bleeding. You're domesticating it, Darian observed one afternoon, watching her practice in the training yard. I'm making it mine, Calith corrected. It chose me as a host. Fine, but I get to choose what kind of host I am. The breakthrough came 2 weeks after the Silverfang confrontation. Calith was in the testing chamber, working through another attempt at understanding the curse's structure, when she felt something shift. The Hollow One's presence, usually dormant, stirred. You are changing the contract, it observed. Yes, that was not our agreement. Our agreement was that I'd carry the curse. I'm carrying it. I just didn't agree to carry it unchanged. A pause. Then something that might have been amusement, clever, like your mother. My mother fought you. I'm negotiating with you. There's a difference. Kalith felt her magic intertwining with the curse, rewriting patterns at the fundamental level. You feed on suffering and isolation. What if I starve you instead? You cannot. Watch me. She thought about Darian, about the warmth of his hand in hers, about the way he looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world, about connection and trust and everything the curse was designed to destroy. And she fed that into the curse instead. The effect was immediate. The Hollow One recoiled, shrieking, "What are you doing?" Changing the terms. You wanted to feed on the gap between what I am and what I could be? Fine. But I get to define that gap. And I choose to define it as the distance between isolation and connection, between fear and trust, between alone and loved. The curse writhed inside her, fighting the transformation. But Kalith had momentum now, had understanding. She drove deeper, rewriting pattern after pattern, replacing cold with warmth, emptiness with fullness. Stop! This will destroy me. No. This will change you. Make you into something that doesn't require suffering to exist. Kalith's magic burned bright as silver fire. My mother died trying to break bindings that enslaved people. I'm finishing her work. I'm breaking you. You cannot break what is eternal. Then I'll transform what is eternal into something beautiful. The curse shattered. Not violently, not explosively. It simply came apart, dissolving into component pieces that Kalith could see and touch and reshape. The Hollow One's consciousness fragmented, its vast emptiness filling with light. And when Kalith put it back together, it was different, still powerful, still ancient, but no longer hungry, no longer consuming, changed. She opened her eyes to find Darian and Corvin staring at her, their expressions shocked. "What just happened?" Corvin asked. Kalith looked at her hands. The gray was fading. The cold was receding. And in its place, something new was growing, magic that was hers, not borrowed, not cursed, but genuinely hers. "I broke the curse," she said wonderingly. "I actually broke it." Darian crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "Are you all right?" "More than all right." Kalith laughed, the sound giddy with relief. "I'm free. We're both free." The magic she carried now was different, cleaner. It still had the power to freeze and preserve, but without the hunger, without the need to consume. It was a tool, not a master. "The council is going to demand to know what happened," Corvin said, but he was smiling. "Let them demand. I have answers now." Kalith pulled back from Darian just enough to look at him. "Your family's curse is gone, completely. No more Hollow Kings, no more slow death." Something cracked in Darian's expression. Relief and joy and 100 other emotions he was still learning to navigate. He kissed her, fierce and desperate and grateful. When they finally separated, Corvin was politely examining the ceiling again. "I'll just, go inform the council that we've had a breakthrough," he said. "Take your time." He left. Kalith and Darian stood together in the testing chamber, surrounded by the remnants of 300 years of suffering, finally free. "What happens now?" Darian asked. "Now we finish exposing the coalition, protect our people, build something better than what came before." Kalith smiled. "And I finally get to live a life that's mine instead of one determined by curses and bindings." "Our life," Darian corrected. "Our life," Kalith agreed. Outside, bells began ringing throughout the fortress. News was spreading. The curse that had haunted the Frostborn royal line for centuries was broken. Their king was free. And the girl who'd refused to kneel had rewritten the rules of reality itself. The celebration lasted exactly 3 hours before reality reasserted itself. Kalith stood in the Great Hall, surrounded by Frostborn nobility, who'd spent weeks calling for her execution and were now tripping over themselves to congratulate her. The hypocrisy would have been funny if it weren't so exhausting. "Remarkable achievement," Lord Vaston said, appearing at her elbow with wine she didn't want. His smile was as fake as his concern had been real. "Breaking a 300-year curse, quite the feat for someone so young." Save it, Calith said flatly. You tried to have me killed 2 weeks ago. I'm not interested in your politics. Vastin's smile froze. I was merely concerned for the kingdom's safety. You were concerned about losing power when Darian recovered. Don't pretend otherwise. Calith set down the wine untouched. The curse is broken. The king is restored. Your games are over. She walked away before he could respond, weaving through the crowd toward where Darian stood with his military advisors. He looked better than she'd ever seen him, color in his face, genuine emotion in his eyes, when he laughed at something Captain Thorne said, like a man instead of a hollowed-out shell. He noticed her approach and excused himself, meeting her halfway. Enjoying the party? He asked, though his eyes said he knew better. I hate parties, especially ones full of people who wanted me dead last week. They'll adjust. People always do when circumstances change. Darian's hand found hers, the touch casual but possessive. Give them time. Time won't change what they are, just what they pretend to be. Before Darian could respond, Morella appeared looking grimmer than usual. My lord, we have a problem. Of course they did. They followed Morella to a small council room where Corvin was waiting with a map spread across the table and a worried expression. Coalition forces are moving, he said without preamble. 3 separate armies, one heading toward Silverfang territory, one toward our southern border, and one... He pointed to a position uncomfortably close to the fortress. Here. They'll arrive within 2 days. How many? Darian asked. Best estimates? 2,000. Well-armed, well-trained, and moving too fast to be a standard deployment. Corvin's finger traced their likely route. They know we're weakened from the Silverfang standoff. They're betting we can't mobilize fast enough to stop them. They're wrong, Darian said coldly. Send word to all garrisons. Full mobilization. And get a message to Silverfang. Tell them the coalition is attacking their territory too. Will they believe us? Morella asked. They will when they see coalition troops crossing their borders. Calith studied the map. The coalition is gambling that old grudges will keep us from cooperating. We prove them wrong by fighting together. An alliance between Frostborn and Silverfang. Darian's expression was thoughtful. That would shift the entire regional power balance. That's exactly what the coalition is trying to prevent. They wanted us destroying each other so they could pick up the pieces. Calith traced the coalition's troop movements. If we unite instead, they lose everything they've invested in this scheme. Then let's give them a surprise they won't forget. Darian turned to Morella. Send riders to Silverfang. Fast horses, best riders. Tell them what's coming and offer alliance terms. What terms? Morella asked. Mutual defense, trade agreements, recognition of territorial boundaries. Darian looked at Calith. And a formal pardon for Calith Varn. Full restoration of her standing in the pack. Calith's breath caught. Darian, you're not in exile anymore. You broke a centuries-old curse and exposed a conspiracy that threatened every pack in the region. That deserves recognition. His hand squeezed hers. And I'm tired of watching you carry a label you never deserved. The Silverfang Council won't agree to that easily. Then they'll have to explain why they're refusing to pardon someone who just saved their territory from invasion. Darian's smile was sharp. Politics cuts both ways. Morella was already writing, her pen scratching across parchment. I'll have the riders ready within the hour. She left. Corvin began rolling up maps, organizing the information they'd need for battle planning, and Calith stood there trying to process the fact that her exile might actually end. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. You're going to be queen someday. Can't have that hanging over you. Calith's heart stuttered. Queen? Darian looked at her like the answer was obvious. Unless you have objections to marrying me eventually, I should probably ask first, but I'm still relearning how emotions work and the timing seemed... Calith kissed him, cutting off the rambling. When they separated, both breathing hard, she said, Ask me after we survive the next few days. Deal. The coalition army arrived exactly when Corvin predicted, 2 days later, at dawn, with siege equipment and enough supplies for a sustained assault. They found the Frostborn garrison ready and waiting. But more than that, they found Silverfang warriors standing alongside Frostborn soldiers on the walls. 2 forces that had been enemies weeks ago, now united against a common threat. Caliph stood on the wall between Darien and Brennan, watching the coalition commanders realize their mistake. You could see it in the way their formations faltered, the way messengers started racing between units. They weren't expecting this, Brennan said, satisfaction clear in his voice. They were expecting us to still be fighting each other. Caliph scanned the coalition lines, looking for the command structure, which means they're operating on bad intelligence and worse assumptions. Their mistake, Darien said. He raised his voice, projecting across the walls. Archers ready. Infantry to positions. The Frostborn and Silverfang forces moved as one. Not perfectly. There were still rough edges, still hesitation from warriors who'd spent generations viewing each other as enemies. But they moved together. That was what mattered. A coalition officer rode forward under a white flag. Caliph recognized him from Corvin's intelligence reports. Commander Rask, one of the coalition's senior military leaders. Alpha King Frost, he called up. We have no quarrel with Frostborn. Stand aside and let us pass. Pass to where? Darien replied. Silverfang territory? That's our ally now. You attack them, you attack us. Rask's expression flickered with surprise, then hardened. You're making a mistake. The coalition offers prosperity and stability. These frontier pacts offer nothing but chaos. These frontier pacts have survived everything you soft Southerners can't imagine, Brennan shouted back. We don't need your prosperity. We have our own. Then you'll die with them. Rask wheeled his horse. Last chance to reconsider, King Frost. I've considered. My answer is no. Withdraw your forces or we'll make you withdraw them. Rask rode back to his lines. Caliph could see him conferring with other officers, gesturing angrily. The coalition army began adjusting formations, preparing for assault. Here we go, Captain Thorne muttered. Brace for impact. The first wave hit 15 minutes later. Coalition soldiers rushed the gates with siege ladders and battering rams, protected by shield walls and covering fire. The Frostborn archers responded with devastating accuracy, dropping attackers before they reached the walls. Silverfang warriors added their own arrow fire, targeting commanders and communication runners. The first wave broke. The second wave came harder, with better coordination. They managed to get ladders against the walls, and fighting erupted along the parapets. Caliph found herself back-to-back with Brennan, using a borrowed sword to hold their section of wall. Just like old times, Brennan shouted over the clash of steel. We never fought together before. Details. A coalition soldier lunged at Caliph. She sidestepped and drove her sword through his guard, then kicked him off the wall. The new magic she carried, the transformed curse, surged in response to the violence, but she kept it contained. No need to freeze the entire battlefield. Not yet. The second wave broke. The third wave brought fire. Coalition forces launched burning projectiles over the walls, trying to create chaos and force defenders to abandon positions. But Caliph had prepared for this. She reached for her magic and sent frost cascading down from the walls, meeting fire with ice. The temperature plummeted, flames sputtered and died. The coalition soldiers hesitated, their confidence shaken. Now, Darien roared. The gates opened. Frostborn cavalry poured out, led by Darien himself on a massive black warhorse. Silverfang warriors followed, shifting between human and wolf form as needed, tearing into the coalition flanks. The battle became chaos. Caliph stayed on the walls, using her magic to support the troops below. Ice that trapped enemy soldiers. Frost that made footing treacherous for coalition forces, but solid for their own. She was careful, precise, making the magic serve rather than consume. The coalition line buckled, then broke. Rask tried to rally his forces, but the combination of Frostborn discipline and Silverfang ferocity was too much. Coalition soldiers began throwing down weapons, surrendering rather than dying for a cause they didn't believe in. Within 2 hours, it was over. Rask was captured alive, his senior officers with him. The coalition army was scattered, demoralized, broken, and standing in the center of the battlefield, surrounded by his warriors and his new allies, Darien looked every inch the king he was always meant to be. Caliph climbed down from the walls and walked through the aftermath, checking on wounded, offering help where she could. Her magic made her useful here too. Ice to numb pain, frost to slow bleeding until proper healers could arrive. She found Darien near the command tent, conferring with Thorne and the Silverfang war leader, a grizzled woman named Kara who'd led their forces with brutal efficiency. 300 coalition casualties, Thorne was reporting. Maybe 400 wounded. On our side, 70 dead, 150 wounded. Could have been much worse. Any word from the other coalition armies? Darian asked. Retreating. Once word spread that their main force was defeated, the others lost their nerve. Kara's smile was predatory. The coalition is finished as a credible threat, at least for now. We should press the advantage, Thorne said. Hit their territories before they can regroup. No, Darian's voice was firm. We've proven our point. Now we negotiate from strength rather than escalating into full regional war. Kara looked surprised. You're not going to crush them? I'm going to make them irrelevant. There's a difference. Darian gestured to the map. The coalition's power came from playing pacts against each other. Now that Frostborn and Silverfang are allied, their influence collapses. We don't need war. We just need to maintain unity. Unity. Kara tested the word like it was foreign. Between Frostborn and Silverfang, my grandmother would have called that fantasy. Your grandmother lived in a different world, Kalith said, joining the group. We're building a new one. Kara studied her for a long moment. You're the exile who broke the curse. I'm the binding breaker who refused to stay broken, Kalith corrected. There's a difference. I like her, Kara told Darian. She's got spine. Among other qualities, Darian said dryly. Speaking of which, we need to discuss the alliance terms in detail. They spent the next 3 hours hammering out the specifics. Trade routes, mutual defense obligations, dispute resolution procedures. It was boring, technical work, but Kalith understood its importance. This was how you built something lasting, not through grand gestures, but through careful negotiation and compromise. By the time they finished, the sun was setting. Kara clasped Darian's forearm in the warrior's greeting. You're not what I expected, King Frost. Good. Predictability is weakness. True enough. Kara turned to Kalith. The council wants to speak with you, privately. Kalith's stomach tightened. When? Tomorrow, if you're willing. I'll be there. After Kara left, Darian pulled Kalith aside. You don't have to do this. We can handle Silverfang relations without... I need to do this. Face them properly. Not as an exile, not as a threat, but as myself. Kalith looked toward where the Silverfang camp was being established. Besides, there are things that need to be said, on both sides. Then I'm coming with you. Darian, not negotiable. You're under my protection, remember? That doesn't stop just because the immediate crisis is over. Kalith wanted to argue, but the fierce protectiveness in his eyes stopped her. Fine. But let me do the talking. Wouldn't dream of interfering. Asag. The Silverfang Council convened at noon the next day in a neutral tent erected between the two camps. Kalith walked in with Darian at her side, Brennan and Garen flanking them as guards. The council members looked older and more worn than before. The battle had taken its toll, but more than that, the revelation of how they'd been manipulated had shaken them badly. Elder Morven stood as they entered. Kalith Varn, Alpha King Frost. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the formalities, Kalith said, taking a seat uninvited. You wanted to talk. Talk. Sarah, the pragmatic council member, spoke first. We owe you an apology, multiple apologies, for your mother's execution, for your exile, for marching an army to your doorstep based on manufactured intelligence. Apologies are words, Kalith said. What are you actually offering? Morven cleared his throat. Full pardon, restoration of your standing in the pack, recognition of your contributions to regional security, and, he paused, an official acknowledgement that your mother was acting to protect you, not betray the pack. Kalith felt something crack inside her chest. She'd been carrying her mother's reputation like a weight for 3 years, and suddenly someone was offering to lift it. Why now? She asked, her voice rougher than intended. What changed? We verified everything you told us, Sarah said quietly. The pact of 20 years. The binding placed on you as an infant. Your mother's attempt to break it. All of it was true. All of it was documented in sealed records we never bothered to check because we were too afraid of what we might find. You traded me, Kalith said, the anger she'd been suppressing finally breaking free. Traded a child to an ancient entity without consent, without warning. And when my mother tried to save me from that fate, you killed her for it. Yes, Morven's voice was heavy. We did, and there's no excuse that makes it right. We were desperate and frightened, and we made a choice that condemned an innocent child. Your mother tried to fix our mistake, and we murdered her to hide what we'd done. So what happens now? Caliph demanded. You apologize, I forgive you, everything goes back to normal? Nothing goes back to normal, Sarah said. Normal is what got us here. We're proposing something different. She pulled out a document and slid it across the table. Caliph picked it up and read. It was a complete restructuring of Silverfang governance, limits on council power, accountability measures, protections against exactly the kind of secret deals that had destroyed her childhood. We're dismantling the system that allowed this to happen, Sarah explained, making it so no council, current or future, can trade lives for political convenience. This is radical, Darian observed, reading over Caliph's shoulder. You're essentially rebuilding your entire governmental structure. It's necessary, Morven said. The old ways led to corruption and injustice. We need new ways, better ways. He looked at Caliph. Your mother died fighting for that. The least we can do is finish what she started. Caliph read through the document again, looking for catches, for loopholes, for ways this could be another manipulation. But it seemed genuine, comprehensive. A real attempt at systemic change. What do you want from me? She asked. Help us implement it, Sarah said. You understand both Silverfang and Frostborn systems now. You've seen what works and what doesn't. We need that perspective. I'm not coming back to live in Silverfang territory. We're not asking you to, but consultation, advice, maybe occasional visits, that would be valuable. Sarah leaned forward. You broke a 300-year curse and exposed a conspiracy that threatened the entire region. You have knowledge and experience we desperately need. Caliph looked at Darian. He gave a slight nod, leaving the choice to her. I'll consult, she said finally, but I'm not responsible for fixing everything you broke. That's your job. I'll offer advice when asked, nothing more. That's fair, Morven said. He pulled out another document, shorter, more formal. This is your official pardon, signed by the full council. Your exile is ended. Your mother's name is cleared. You are welcome in Silverfang territory whenever you choose to visit. He slid it across the table. Caliph stared at the parchment. 3 years of being an outcast. 3 years of carrying the weight of false accusations and manufactured shame ended with a piece of paper and some signatures. It should have felt bigger, more dramatic. Instead, it just felt done. She signed the acknowledgement and stood. Thank you for the apology and the reforms. I hope you actually follow through. We will, Sarah promised. Too many people died for us not to. As they left the tent, Brennan caught up with them. So you're really staying with Frostborn? I'm really staying with Darian, Caliph corrected. Frostborn is just where he happens to live. Brennan smiled. Good. You belong somewhere you're valued. He clasped her shoulder briefly. Be happy, Caliph. You earned it. Aw. The next month was a whirlwind of political maneuvering and reconstruction. The Frostborn Silverfang Alliance, formalized with trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Other pacts, seeing the benefits, approached with their own proposals. The regional power structure was shifting, the old hierarchies crumbling. The coalition retreated to lick their wounds, their influence shattered. Commander Rask, in exchange for clemency, provided detailed intelligence about coalition operations. Turned out they'd been planning this power grab for 5 years, systematically weakening rival pacts through manipulation and manufactured conflicts. Now their schemes were public knowledge, and no one trusted them anymore. Lord Vastin and Lady Meredith were quietly removed from the Frostborn Council. Not executed, not exiled, just stripped of power and sent to manage minor estates far from the political center. Darian's mercy surprised everyone, including them. Killing them makes them martyrs, he explained to Caliph one evening as they reviewed reports. Humiliating them makes them examples. You've gotten better at this, Caliph observed. The whole ruthless but fair thing. I had a good teacher. He looked at her over the documents. You showed me that strength doesn't always mean violence. Sometimes it means building something better than what came before. I showed you that? You refused to kneel when anyone else would have begged. Took a curse to save someone you barely knew. Faced down an army alone, rather than let people die for you. Yes, you showed me that. Darian set aside the reports and moved to where Calith sat by the fire. You're the strongest person I've ever met, and you didn't need a crown or an army to prove it. Calith felt heat rise in her cheeks. You're getting sappy in your old age. I'm 28. Ancient. He pulled her close, and she leaned into the embrace, letting herself have this moment of peace. Outside, winter was settling over the mountains. Inside, the fire crackled warmth and light. I have something for you, Darian said after a while. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple silver with a stone that shifted between blue and white depending on the light. Is this, Calith started, a proposal? Yes. I know I said I'd wait until after the crisis, but the crisis is always going to be something. There's always another threat, another problem, another disaster waiting. Darian took the ring out carefully. So I'm asking now, while we have a moment of peace, Calith Varn, binding breaker and curse shatterer, will you marry me and help me rebuild this kingdom into something worth protecting? Calith looked at the ring, at Darian's face, at the future stretching out before them full of possibility and challenge. Yes, she said, but only if you stop calling me curse shatterer. It sounds ridiculous. Noted. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. How about Queen? Will you accept that title? Eventually, after we fix a few more broken systems and dismantle a few more corrupt power structures. So, a few months then. Optimist. They sat together by the fire as snow began falling outside, planning the wedding and the reforms and the 100 other things that needed doing. It wasn't the peaceful ending Calith had once imagined, wasn't quiet or simple or easy, but it was real, and it was theirs. The wedding took place 3 months later, during the spring thaw when the mountains transformed from white to green and the rivers ran fast with snowmelt. Representatives from every pack in the region attended, Silverfang, of course, but also delegations from territories that had never bothered with Frostborn politics before. The Frostborn Silverfang alliance had changed the equation, and everyone wanted to be part of whatever came next. Calith wore a dress that managed to be both traditional and defiant, white silk embroidered with silver patterns that echoed the binding breaker symbols from her mother's research. Darian wore formal armor polished to mirror brightness, every inch the warrior king. They exchanged vows in the great hall before witnesses from a dozen packs, promised to protect each other and the kingdom they were building together, sealed it with a kiss that made even the grizzled warriors smile. The feast afterward lasted until dawn. Calith found herself pulled into 100 conversations, political discussions disguised as congratulations, alliance proposals wrapped in well wishes, intelligence gathering masked as friendly interest. She handled it all with the same careful precision she'd learned over the past months, giving nothing away while gathering everything. Late in the evening, Elder Morven approached. He'd aged visibly since their last meeting, the weight of reforms and revelations taking their toll. Congratulations, Queen Calith, he said formally. Not queen yet, just married. Calith accepted wine from a passing servant. Give it time. Time. Morven's expression turned distant. Your mother used to say that time reveals all truths eventually. I used to think she was being philosophical. Now I understand she was being literal. She usually was. I wanted you to know the reforms are working. Slowly, messily, but working. We've dissolved 3 corrupt deals in the past month alone. Found contracts and bindings hidden in archives for decades. Morven met her eyes. Your mother would be proud of what you've accomplished. She'd be proud of what you're accomplishing, Calith corrected. I just pointed out the problems. You're actually fixing them. We're trying to deserve the second chance you gave us. Then keep trying. Don't stop just because it gets hard. After Morven left, Sarah approached with news that the Silverfang Council had just voted unanimously to establish a memorial for Calith's mother, acknowledging her sacrifice and clearing her name publicly. It's not enough, Sarah said. Nothing can bring her back. But it's something. It's a start, Calith agreed. Thank you. Later, much later, after the guests had finally dispersed and the hall had emptied, Calith stood on the balcony looking out over the kingdom. Darian joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. Tired? He asked. Exhausted, but good exhausted. There's more work tomorrow. Always more work. I know. Caliph leaned into him. But tonight, we celebrate. Tomorrow, we build. They stood together watching the sun rise over the mountains, painting the snow gold in pink and orange. A new day, a new beginning. And for the girl who'd once stood barefoot in a rejection circle refusing to break, this was more than she'd ever dared to hope for. Not just survival, not just revenge, but something better. A life built on truth instead of lies. Power earned through courage instead of inherited through bloodlines. A kingdom transforming from one built on fear into one built on justice. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be setbacks and failures and moments when everything seemed to be falling apart. But they would face those challenges together, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd both been broken by corrupt systems and had chosen to build something better from the pieces. "I love you," Darian said quietly. Caliph turned to look at him, this man who'd been a hollow shell when they met and was now fully, brilliantly alive. "I love you too." They kissed as the sun cleared the horizon, and somewhere in the distance, wolves howled greeting to the new day. The age of curses and bindings was ending. The age of binding breakers and curse shatters was just beginning. And Caliph Varn, who had refused to kneel, who had survived exile and curse and war, who had transformed suffering into strength and isolation into alliance, stood at the center of it all, not as a victim, not as an outcast, but as a queen. The story that had started with rejection ended with recognition. The girl who had been cast out had come home, not to the place she'd been born, but to the place she'd built with her own hands and her own strength and her own refusal to accept the fate others had chosen for her. She had rewritten destiny itself, and she wasn't done yet. Below in the courtyard, servants were already beginning the day's work. Soldiers were changing shifts on the walls. Messengers were arriving with news from distant territories. The kingdom was waking up, and there was always more to do. But for now, for this moment, Caliph allowed herself to just be. To stand with the man she loved and look out over the kingdom they were building and feel something she hadn't felt since before her mother's death. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, there would always be conflict, but the presence of purpose, of belonging, of knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The binding breaker had broken the chains that held her. The curse shatterer had shattered the curse that defined her. And the queen, for she was a queen now, whether the coronation had happened yet or not, had claimed her throne not through birthright or conquest, but through courage and sacrifice and an absolute refusal to let others write her story. This was her story now, and it was only just beginning.